People always asked what I did for a living, and I always answered the same way. I work at a factory. No shame in it. Injection molding wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. The kind of job that left oil on your boots and pride in your chest. I'd clock in at 6:45 a.m., earplugs in, and navigate the orchestra of steam, pressure, and precision. The machines roared like dragons, belching out plastic casings and parts with heat you could feel in your teeth. I'd gotten good at tuning it all out, letting the rhythm of the work carry me. But that night, that message. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I had just come home from the second shift, palms sore and shirt clinging to my back. I was standing by the sink, washing off the smell of burnt polymer and tired dreams when my phone buzzed. Family group chat, normally filled with memes, birthday reminders, prayer chains. I wiped my hands on my jeans and tapped it open without a thought. Letitia's name was at the top. All my friends' husbands are successful, except mine. You chose to be a factory worker, and I no longer see you as my husband. Please don't show up. Attached was a digital invite, her birthday dinner. Saturday. The same upscale restaurant we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary in. Same time, same friends, same family. The only thing missing? Me. I read it 3 times. Each word dug into me like a cold blade. Not angry, just surgical. She didn't shout, didn't argue. She dismissed me with the ease of deleting a draft email. I scrolled up in the chat, just to make sure I hadn't missed some build-up, some fight, some passive-aggressive comment that might have predicted this. There was nothing. Just 3 days earlier, she'd sent a picture of the new curtains she bought with a laughing emoji. And now this. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could type something. Anything. Well, okay. Why? But nothing came. No words seemed big enough to confront the smallness I suddenly felt. I put the phone down. Not on the charger. Not beside my wallet like usual. Just down. I walked to the bedroom and looked around. The lamp she picked out. The rug I vacuumed last weekend. The picture of us in Cabo, smiling into sunlight that never reached our bones. I didn't touch anything. I didn't pack. I just sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the silence settle in like fog over a dying field. People think heartbreak is dramatic. Tears, screaming, slamming doors. But mine was quiet. It came in waves of realization. This wasn't about the message. It was about every look she gave other men when we were out. The way she introduced me. This is Aaron. He works at a plant. Like I was a character in her sitcom she no longer found funny. This was confirmation of the shift I'd been too tired to name. Letitia was no longer mine. Hadn't been for a while. Maybe never really was. And I was done performing the role of the shameful husband. The one who failed by choosing stability over ambition. She called me small, but I'd carried us through layoffs, medical bills, a miscarriage she refused to talk about. And now, because I didn't chase a corner office, I was unwanted. I walked outside and sat on the steps. The night air was thick and smelled of rain, even though the sky was clear. Across the street, the Wilsons were arguing again. Their voices floated like background noise while I stared at my reflection in the neighbor's car window. I looked tired, not from the factory, but from trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. That message didn't break me. It clarified everything. There wasn't going to be some grand confrontation. No speech. No, how could you? I wasn't going to beg for a place at her table. If she wanted a party without me, she could have it. But she would never again have the quiet comfort of my loyalty. She wouldn't get to have me sitting at the head of the table one day, pretending we built anything together. She forfeited that. I went back inside, took a long shower, and let the steam bleed the fatigue from my skin. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because it felt like grieving someone who'd already been a ghost for years. Letitia hadn't been my partner in a long time. I had just kept pretending. When I climbed into bed, I didn't touch her. She was asleep, turned away, breathing like the world was fine. And maybe for her, it was. The next morning, I packed a single bag, 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, my toolbox. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out, quietly. By the time she'd wake up, I'd be on my way to nowhere in particular. Just somewhere that didn't require me to apologize for being the man I was. Not the one she wanted to replace, but the one who no longer needed her permission to grow. And that was the beginning of everything. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't even close it all the way. It clicked shut behind me like an afterthought. My boots echoed on the concrete steps, a sound more final than any argument we never had. There was no fight. No shouting. No, How dare you, or please don't go. Just me, walking away with a duffel bag that barely zipped and a silence that finally felt like mine. I found a small rental 2 blocks from the factory. A studio with one window and a sink that hissed like it was angry to be used. The mattress came from a coworker named Luis who had a spare in his garage. No couch. No TV. Just peace. The kind of peace you don't realize you've been starving for until you take the first real breath in years. I sat on that mattress that first night, surrounded by blank walls and echoes of nothing, and it felt like freedom dressed in poverty. I took double shifts the next week. Volunteered for weekends. There was no one to go home to. No one to ask where I'd been. The foreman noticed, but didn't say much. Just gave me a nod that said, "You're one of the ones who doesn't fold." I like that. I like not folding. Letitia didn't call. Not once. No texts. No, where are you? Nothing. And in that silence, I realized something brutal. She didn't care. Not enough to ask. Not even enough to pretend. Her message had been a door closing, and she never once checked to see if I was still standing on the other side. Her family didn't reach out either. Judith, her sister, used to text me Sunday jokes and ask about my barbecue recipes. Reina once asked me to fix the radiator in her car, and I drove across town at midnight to help her. Damari, Letitia's loudmouth cousin, borrowed my car more times than I could count, sometimes for whole weekends. I used to cook for them. I used to sit with them on the porch, beer in hand, watching the sky turn gold. But when I left, they followed her silence like it was gospel. My name vanished from their mouths. The WhatsApp group stayed active. I checked once. They were still tagging each other in dinner invites, sending filtered selfies with clinking wine glasses. Letitia posted a picture of her birthday dinner at that same upscale place. She wore red. Her favorite, "Look at me," color. The caption read, "Surrounded by love." I stared at it for 5 seconds, then deleted the group. Not because I was bitter, but because I'd decided, if I wasn't part of the picture, I wouldn't be part of the gallery either. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. It was more like pruning a tree that had grown wild and strangled the sunlight, cutting off what no longer served me. I stopped wearing the wedding ring. I stopped checking the mailbox at the old house. I started showing up early to shifts and staying late, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I was becoming someone else entirely. At night, I enrolled in online classes: logistics, supply chain management, industrial safety compliance. Dry stuff. The kind that made your eyes glaze over if you didn't care. But I cared. Not for her. Not even for revenge. I cared because something in me had clicked. If I was going to rebuild, I wasn't going to do it halfway. There were nights when it got to me, though. Quiet ones. I'd fold laundry in the tiny unit washer, the smell of detergent rising like a ghost from old habits. And out of nowhere, the tears would come. Not sobbing. Just the kind that slipped down without warning. Not for Letitia. No. Those tears were for the man who had once believed in her. The one who thought forever was a promise and not a performance. I mourned him. The version of me that thought love was enough. But then I dry my face and start reading again. Manuals. Coursework. Productivity audits. Because every time I pushed forward, I erased a little more of the need to be seen by people who never really saw me. I became invisible, but not in the way most people fear. I became invisible to the wrong crowd, her crowd. The kind who measured worth by designer watches and what title followed your name. Letitia had once whispered to her friend at a party, "He works with his hands, not his brain." I'd laughed it off at the time. But now? Now I realized she meant it. And I was done carrying the weight of someone else's disappointment. At the factory, I stopped being that quiet guy on line 3. I started being the one who had answers. When a machine jammed, I didn't wait for the tech. I solved it. When the inventory wasn't lining up, I offered solutions. My name started getting passed up the chain. Jerome called me the man with the backup plan. I like that. I bought a whiteboard. Stuck it to the wall above my little desk in the corner of the apartment. I wrote 3 things on it. 1. Don't explain your worth. 2. Grow anyway. 3. Quiet is power. That became my rhythm. Work. Study. Breathe. Repeat. No more waiting for someone to appreciate me. No more giving love like spare change, hoping it would be enough. I wasn't subtracting from myself anymore to make others feel whole. Letitia could have the spotlight. The dinner parties. The filtered versions of her life that made her feel important. I didn't need to outshine her. I just needed to stop shrinking around her. And that's exactly what I did. Quietly. Intentionally. unapologetically. I became the man she never stayed long enough to meet. At the factory, it was easy to blend in. The machines screamed loud enough to drown out most thoughts, and people kept to their lanes. No one asked questions they didn't want real answers to. I liked it that way. Kept my head down, earplugs in, mind focused on keeping production flowing. The rhythm of repetition gave me something to hold on to, steps I could follow without looking back. Jerome, one of the floor techs, had a loud mouth and a louder laugh. He cracked jokes during breaks, mostly about his ex-wife or his fantasy football team. He never asked me about Letitia, never asked why I started taking all the night shifts or why I never mentioned a home. That silence, that unspoken respect for boundaries, meant more to me than any sympathy ever could. Luis, a younger guy with a newborn at home, started handing me his extra lunch some days. Said his wife packed too much. I knew better. He saw the way I ate alone, quiet, methodical, with the hunger of a man surviving more than one kind of starvation. Still, I took the food. Said thanks. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't always come with therapy or monologues. Sometimes it shows up in a shared sandwich in the break room. But the pain? That came like water damage. Slow. Silent. Creeping up on the edges of everything. Some nights I'd come home and find myself folding laundry I didn't remember washing. A shirt I wore for years, suddenly threadbare. Socks with no pair. The process felt familiar. And that's what made it worse. Folding clothes was something Letitia and I used to do together. Late night talks while separating lights and darks. Joking about how I never folded towels, right? I'd smile through those memories until one of them hit me too hard. And then I'd just sit there, a half-folded hoodie in my lap, breathing like it hurt. But I didn't cry for her. No, that part of me had already died. I cried for the version of her I had built in my head. The one who used to kiss me goodnight and meet me at the door with leftover stew and a smile. That woman, the one I fought for, sacrificed for, she never really existed. Not outside the version I made up. That was the grief that gutted me, realizing I'd been in love with a mirage. So I buried her. Not the woman, but the illusion. Every time I remembered something sweet, a birthday card, a picnic, a joke we used to share, I'd let it rise and fall like a tide. No resisting, no clinging, just observing. And then I'd tell myself, that version of her is gone. She never truly lived outside your hope. It sounds cold, but it's not. It's clarity. The kind that comes when you stop rewriting the story to make pain look like purpose. She wasn't broken. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly who she was, and I just wasn't enough for her vision of success. That's not tragedy. That's rejection. And rejection doesn't deserve worship. I found comfort in systems, things that didn't betray you. Manuals, flowcharts, schedules. I started reading production logic guides during my lunch breaks. Studied how supply chains broke down. What caused bottlenecks? How to improve waste management on the floor. I'd go home and highlight pages until my eyes blurred. Then I'd wake up and test the theories in real time. It wasn't about ambition at first. It was about distraction. Filling the space Letitia used to occupy with knowledge that couldn't hurt me. But slowly, something shifted. I began enjoying it. Not just learning, but improving. I started seeing problems before they happened. Fixing things without being asked. Even the foreman, a man who rarely gave compliments, started saying, "You got eyes, Aaron." Like you see things other folks miss. He didn't know I had nothing else to look at. No family dinners. No Sunday traditions. Just steel, plastic, and patterns. Still, his words landed. For the first time in a long time, I felt like more than what I'd been labeled. Not just the man who got left. Not just the factory worker Letitia disowned. I was rebuilding something. Quietly. Brick by brick. And with each small win, each machine optimized, each shift managed better than the last, I felt a part of me come back to life. The part that used to believe I could be something. Not for her, not for approval, but for myself. One night, as I sat on my mattress-turned couch reading about warehouse logistics, I whispered aloud, "You're not the man she left anymore. You're the man she buried too soon." It felt true. She thought I was finished. Thought discarding me would be clean and consequence-free. But she didn't know the difference between silence and surrender. I wasn't laying down. I was planting roots. Quietly, patiently. Somewhere between the manuals and the midnight shifts, I started dreaming again. Not big dreams, just real ones. Owning a reliable car. Renting a place with real furniture. Maybe, one day, Someone who would sit across from me and not look past me. I wasn't there yet, but I was moving. And every quiet night, every whispered thought, every tear shed over someone who never deserved it, it all turned to fuel. By the end of that year, I was no longer the man Letitia discarded. I was the man she never waited long enough to see grow. And that made all the difference. The first time I noticed her, she was wearing a gray hoodie and holding a clipboard like it was an extension of her arm. Ria, logistics coordinator. She moved through the factory like someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone, and somehow, that made her impossible to ignore. No designer bag, no perfectly curated presence, just steel-toe boots, an organized mind, and the kind of posture that said she didn't need anyone to validate her role. That alone was new to me. Refreshing. It started small, brief nods in the hallway, clipped conversations during shift transitions. She corrected a mislabeled crate once and caught me watching. "Don't worry, I'm not here to make enemies," she said, lips twitching at the corner like she was used to being misunderstood. I shrugged. "I'm just here to keep the machines running." That got a smile out of her, not the fake kind, but the kind you remember because it feels earned. Our first real conversation came during a vending machine standoff. The coffee machine jammed, and we both stood there like it had personally offended us. I slapped the side. She hit the cancel button twice. Nothing. She exhaled, leaned against the wall, and said, "You ever feel like this machine is a metaphor for your life?" I chuckled. "You're assuming my life has enough caffeine and buttons to break." She laughed, not the polite office kind, but the kind that spills out like it forgot to ask permission. We talked for half an hour right there. About late shifts, supply chain errors, and why the upstairs bathroom had better toilet paper. It wasn't flotation. It was ease. I told her early on that I was technically still married. Not legally separated, not divorced. Just gone. She told me I wasn't good enough, so I left, I said, voice even. No bitterness. Just fact. Ria didn't flinch. She sipped her paper cup of bitter coffee and replied, "Then you're freer than most men I know." That line stuck with me. Not because it was romantic, but because it was true. Over the next few months, she became a regular part of my day. We didn't rush anything. No dramatic declarations. Just one long conversation that kept finding its next chapter. We'd eat in the parking lot some nights, leaning on my car, passing chips between us like teenagers avoiding the world. One night, she handed me her keys. "Come over," she said. "I have an actual couch. And better coffee." I followed her without asking what we were. That night, I sat in her small but clean apartment, flipping through channels we didn't really watch. She curled beside me, not leaning in like a lifeline, but sitting close like someone who chose presence over need. It was the first time I'd been touched without an agenda in years. When I kissed her, it wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about honoring something that had quietly grown without demand. By the end of the year, I'd moved in. My mattress was replaced with her guest room set. My toolbox got its own corner in her closet. We had a rhythm. Morning routines with shared toothpaste and mismatched mugs, quiet dinners where we didn't need to talk to feel heard. She didn't ask me to become anyone else. She didn't try to fix what Letitia left behind. She just made space and let me fill it on my own terms. When Ria got pregnant, I froze. Not because I didn't want it, but because I suddenly realized how much I did. I watched her hold the test in our tiny bathroom, her face a mix of steady nerves and quiet hope. "You okay?" she asked, watching me instead of the stick. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I am." She smiled. "I wasn't sure if we should tell Letitia," she added. "Just to be clear." I stared at her, amazed she even considered it. "Let her read about it one day," I said, and that was the end of that. We didn't announce it like a headline. No social media posts, no group chats. Just quiet preparations. We repainted the second bedroom in soft earth tones, bought second-hand baby clothes, and argued about stroller features like season pros. Every kick felt like a new contract with the life I was building. A life that had nothing to do with who had walked away from me, and everything to do with who chose to stay. Ria didn't treat me like a project. She didn't see my past as a shadow trailing her. She met me where I stood and walked beside me without reaching for the reins. When I came home from late shifts, she'd leave a plate on the counter with a sticky note, "You're not your old address." For words that healed more than I can explain. One night, as we sat on the porch, our hands resting on her stomach, she said, "You know, I didn't think I'd end up with someone like you." I raised an eyebrow. "Factory worker, huh?" She shook her head. "No. Someone so unshakably calm. You don't need to be loud to hold space. That's rare. I didn't reply. Just kissed the back of her hand and let that moment settle. I used to think being enough meant earning someone's approval. Letitia taught me otherwise. She taught me that no amount of effort makes you worthy to someone who's already decided you're not. Rhea? She never made me earn love. She just returned it. In presence. In patience. In every quiet choice to stay. So no, I wasn't trying to replace Letitia. I buried that woman in everything she stood for. Rhea wasn't a rebound. She was a reset. A new kind of wife. The kind who saw the man I was becoming and decided he was already enough. I never sought recognition. I wasn't the man who stood on tables to be noticed or raised his hand every time something went right. I like the shadows. I like the grind. Because in the shadows, there's no spotlight blinding you to the truth, and the grind never lied. You put in the hours, you saw results. No politics. No performance. Just work. It started with a memo. Waste percentages in our injection lines were through the roof. We were tossing out almost as much as we were shipping. Most people grumbled, blamed the machines, shrugged. But I couldn't let it go. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the engineer in me that never got a degree but still loved fixing things. Either way, I stayed after hours one night with a clipboard and a thermos of coffee, mapping the entire workflow like a battlefield. Turns out, the problem wasn't the machines. It was the process. We were stacking jobs back to back with no buffer time. One jam caused a cascade, which meant half the line went idle while the other half drowned. I sketched out a staggered rotation model. Simple enough. Give the floor a pulse instead of letting it flatline under pressure. I submitted the notes to our supervisor. Didn't expect much. Maybe a thanks, maybe a half smile. But 2 weeks later, the waste numbers dropped by 18%. By the end of the quarter, it was 34%. The plant director called me into his office, not to reprimand, but to ask how I'd seen what no one else did. I watched, I told him. I listened to the machines. They talk, if you let them. That line ended up in the article. Some intern from a local business magazine came to the factory on a Monday. I didn't know she was writing a profile. I thought she was doing a piece on manufacturing trends. She asked me a few questions between line tours, nothing heavy. What's your role here? How'd you come up with the new model? I answered with my usual brevity. I show up. I solve problems. I don't complain. Apparently, that made good copy. The article went live on a Friday. From line worker to director, the man behind Haverly Plant's turnaround. My name was there. Aaron Langley. Picture 2, me in my steel-toe boots and grease-stained jacket, arms folded in front of line 3. The reporter called it quiet innovation. Said I represented the kind of leadership companies were desperate for, unpolished, unpretentious, unstoppable. The HR manager forwarded it with a note. Well-deserved, Aaron. This is only the beginning. I didn't think much of it. Didn't even post it. But the internet did what the internet does. By the end of the day, my inbox was a minefield. Emails from regional HQ. An invitation to speak at a local industry roundtable. But it was the messages I didn't expect that made my stomach tighten. Damari. Yo, saw the article. Crazy how far you've come. Bro, proud of you. Reina. Hey stranger. I knew you were always more than that factory job. Let's catch up. Even Judith chimed in with a backhanded compliment. So proud of your growth. You really blossomed after everything. And then, Letitia's hairdresser of all people messaged me. She saw it. She's been talking about you nonstop. Said you look refined now. Whatever that means. I didn't reply to any of them. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. These were the same people who deleted me from their dinner tables, their group chats, their holiday lists. When Letitia stripped me of value, they followed her lead like loyal echo chambers. And now? Because my name was on a byline and my face was in a glossy filter, I was interesting again? No thank you. Rhea read the article quietly, holding her coffee with both hands, our daughter Maris kicking inside her like she could feel the shift in the air. It's good, she said, looking up. But it's not new. I raised a brow. What do you mean? She shrugged. They're just catching up to the man I've been seeing all along. That hit harder than any headline ever could. We didn't celebrate. We didn't go out to dinner or post cute pictures with captions. We made rice and beans, folded laundry, and watched Maris's crib delivery tracking update on Rhea's phone. Because life wasn't about who finally saw me. It was about who never needed to be told. That night, I went out onto the apartment balcony. It overlooked the factory parking lot. dim lights, faint engine sounds. The same place I once sat, eating cold sandwiches alone and wondering if I'd ever matter again. I thought about the message that started it all. Letitia's birthday dinner. Please don't show up. She didn't want me there because I wasn't successful enough. Because I chose the floor over a desk, grid over image. Funny how that very choice is what carried me forward. Letitia didn't break me. She revealed me. The difference between the two is subtle, but critical. So no, I didn't respond to the messages. I let them hang in digital limbo like invitations to a party I'd already outgrown. Let the article speak. Let the silence fill the gaps they once filled with judgment. I didn't owe them words. I owed myself peace, and I'd earned it. Every shift, every sleepless night, every ignored call and unread text, every moment I showed up, not because I had something to prove, but because I refused to disappear. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. It came late on a Tuesday night, Letitia's text. I was home, barefoot in the kitchen, warming a bottle for Maris while Rhea folded baby clothes in the living room. The soft hum of our quiet life surrounded me, all gentle movement and whispered routine. And then my phone buzzed. Saw the article. Proud of you. Want to talk? I stared at the screen like it was a trick mirror. The words didn't sting. They didn't even surprise me. But they felt like a ghost brushing past my shoulder, familiar, unwanted, weightless. I set the bottle down on the counter, not because it was urgent, but because I didn't want to read it while holding something that mattered. 3 minutes later, she called. No, hello. Just her voice, breathy and careful, like she was testing the water with each syllable. I always knew you had potential, she said. There it was. Always. The word that made me laugh. I covered my mouth with my hand and exhaled through my nose, not because I was amused, but because that lie had lived too long in her mouth. Always? No. She saw me as a placeholder. A patch. A man who was only as useful as his potential could serve her image. She didn't always know. If she had, she wouldn't have told the entire family I was the weight holding her down. I let her speak. She asked how I was. Said she missed talking to me. Even asked about the factory, like it was still just a floor of machines and not the place I had reshaped with my own 2 hands. I leaned against the counter and watched Rhea laugh quietly at something on TV, baby clothes stacked beside her like soft armor. And then Letitia said it. You're still my husband, you know. That's when I knew she hadn't changed. Not even a little. It wasn't a question. Not an apology. It was a claim. Like she still owned the title. Like the years of silence, of deletion, of betrayal had been some sort of intermission, and now the curtain could rise again. She said it softly, like maybe I'd forgotten who I was supposed to be. Her husband. But that's the thing, she wasn't calling the man she left. She was calling the man who rose. And that man? He didn't belong to her. I waited for the silence to settle on the line before I spoke. Please don't call me again. Simple. Calm. Surgical. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she assumed I still needed the validation of her attention. But I didn't. Wait, Aaron, she started. But I ended the call. It didn't feel powerful. It felt necessary. That was the difference between then and now. Then, I was surviving her indifference. Now, I was protecting my peace. I walked back into the living room. Rhea looked up, folding the last onesie. Her eyes scanned my face, reading me like she always did. She didn't ask who it was. She didn't need to. Whatever she said, Rhea murmured, standing and pressing her palm to my cheek. It doesn't undo who you are now. And I leaned into that truth. Letitia had spent years pretending I was small, while I built something she never believed I could. She thought success came with business cards and bragging rights. But I had learned that real success comes in layers, quiet growth, earned peace, the ability to walk away without a scar screaming behind you. She had called me her husband because she thought that title had elasticity, like she could stretch it over time and distance, over betrayal and dismissal. But marriage isn't a rubber band, it's a door. And when she slammed it shut that night in the group chat, she locked herself out. I didn't tell Rhea what Letitia said until the next morning. We were at the table, breakfast half-eaten, Maris cooing in her bouncer. She called me her husband, I said, breaking the silence. Rhea didn't flinch, just stirred her tea slowly. Still trying to name things she no longer owns, she replied. That was her gift, truth in soft wrapping. I thought about all the ways Letitia had tried to rewrite the past. The cold looks across the dinner table. The time she laughed when I showed her a certificate from my first logistics course. The party she planned and uninvited me from, because my job didn't match her friends' husbands. She hadn't mourned the man she lost. She mourned the version of herself she imagined she'd become, standing beside someone more worthy. But I had stopped chasing her definition of worth the day I walked out without slamming the door. And now, when people said husband, I thought of the life I'd built in a quiet apartment filled with real laughter. I thought of Rhea and how she never once tried to mold me into someone shinier. I thought of Maris, whose first word would be shaped not by the voice of pain, but by the echo of love. Letitia's voice used to matter, used to guide me, affect me, define me. No, it was just another noise I could turn off. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. She could watch from a distance if she wanted. That was her new place in my life, the rearview mirror. And I wasn't looking back. It was a Thursday when she showed up, Letitia. The receptionist buzzed me just before lunch. There's a woman down here asking for you, Sandra said, voice hesitant. Name, she says. Letitia Langley. Even hearing it felt foreign, like the syllables belonged to a different life. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the spreadsheet in front of me, but no longer seeing numbers. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 3 years, not in a way that claimed me. I'll handle it, I told Sandra, then muted my phone and stood up slowly, the weight of memory heavier than the polished boots on my feet. From the glass wall of my office on the top floor, I had a full view of the lobby. There she was, red blouse, slim heels, arms crossed over her purse like she was holding together the version of herself she still believed in. The same one who thought appearance meant power. Her hair was pulled back tight, her lipstick was bold. A statement, no doubt. A signal that she came prepared for some grand moment. But what struck me most was the way she looked around. Eyes scanning the room, uncertain. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. I didn't move, didn't go down. I stayed exactly where I was, watching the same way I once waited for her at dinner tables she never showed up for. There was something deeply poetic in it. Me behind glass, her on the other side, and nothing between us but time and truth. She spoke to Sandra again. I saw her lean in, probably dropping my title, trying to gain favor. But status doesn't grant access here, not anymore. She waved her hands a little. Sandra stayed calm, professional, just like I trained her to be. I told her to treat every guest with kindness, but firmness too. No exceptions. Then she looked up. She spotted me. Somehow, through the distance and the glare, our eyes met. And for the first time, I saw it. Not pride, not defiance, just desperation. She mouthed my name, but I didn't move. Not an inch. Letitia had made it clear, years ago, who was and wasn't worthy of her presence. She had drawn the lines, circled the wagons, laughed at my job title and told the world I wasn't someone to claim. And now here she was, at my building, my office, where my name was etched on a plaque by the front door, asking for what? A do-over? A seat at a table she never helped build? No. I buzzed Sandra. Have security walk her out, I said, flatly. Be polite, but firm. There was a pause on the line, a quiet hesitation, but then a calm, understood. 2 minutes later, I watched as David from security approached Letitia. She argued at first, hands gesturing, her mouth forming rapid-fire words that meant nothing from this far up. But it didn't matter. David remained professional, gestured toward the door. And slowly, her posture shifted. The steel in her spine melted into something brittle. I saw her shoulders drop. Her mouth pressed into a flat line. She clutched her purse like it could hold her dignity in place. And she walked. No one cheered. No music played. But for me, that quiet walk toward the exit was louder than any apology she could have offered. When the lobby doors closed behind her, I sat back down at my desk, heart beating steady, mind clear. She had thrown me out of her life like I was defective merchandise and embarrassment. Told our entire family I wasn't a real man. And now she thought she could re-enter the world I'd built without a single acknowledgement of what she'd shattered? Showing up in person wasn't brave. It was late. Too late. An hour later, I went home. Rhea was on the porch, baby monitor in one hand, a book in the other. She looked up as I walked in, and just from my face, she knew something had shifted. She came, I said. Rhea didn't ask who. She just nodded, closing the book without marking the page. What did you do? I watched her leave. She studied me for a moment, then said, Good. That night, I sat in Maris's nursery. She was sleeping, little hands curled into fists, her chest rising and falling in soft rhythm. I ran a hand across the crib railing, grounding myself in the quiet. Letitia's face had once been the sun in my sky. I moved around it, adjusted myself to its brightness and shadow. I spent years trying to be what she could love. But that face I saw today, that wasn't the sun. It was a sunset. Beautiful once. But over. And I wasn't chasing twilight anymore. It was a yellow envelope, thick and unmarked, tucked between a grocery flyer and a water bill. No stamp. No return address. Just my name in that looping handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Rhea found it. She'd gone to check the mailbox while Mara snapped and handed it to me without saying anything. Her brows knit in that way they did when something didn't sit right. She dropped this off, she said, while you were at work. My chest tightened, not out of fear, but out of frustration. Letitia had crossed a line. This wasn't a text, an email, a call. This was her stepping onto my porch, invading the life she once deemed beneath her. A house she'd never been invited to. A family she had no claim to. She saw me, Rhea added quietly. And Maris. That was enough. I opened the letter slowly, careful not to rip it. Not because I cared about the contents, but because I wanted to see her words for exactly what they were. No distortions. No noise. The paper was thick, perfumed faintly like citrus and regret. The message was what I expected. A meandering mix of nostalgia, selective memory, and wounded pride. Aaron, we all make mistakes. I didn't realize how much I had until I saw you in that article. You look different. Like you found your strength. I'm not asking to undo anything, just... I miss the version of us that used to laugh at bad movies and eat cereal at midnight. Remember that? I wonder if maybe we can talk. Just talk. You were always a good man. I just didn't know how good. There it was again. Always. The word she clung to when rewriting history. And then, near the bottom. I miss the sense of family we had. I want to see how you've changed. Maybe meet your daughter. She should know who I am. I folded the letter once. Then again. Then a third time. Each crease felt like a blade. She didn't say Maris's name. Didn't acknowledge Rhea. Didn't admit the cruelty of erasing me from her world when I had nothing but loyalty to offer. This wasn't accountability. It was control disguised as sentiment. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, her voice soft like old velvet. You read it? Yes. A pause. And, you came to my house, Letitia. I just wanted to drop the letter off myself. You saw my wife, I interrupted, voice calm, but edged in iron. And you saw my daughter. Another pause. Shorter this time. Sharper. I didn't mean any harm, Aaron. I just... No. You don't get to use that word anymore. Just... That word is a shield for cowards who don't want to take real responsibility. You don't get to pop up at my door after years of silence and think that because I have something worth seeing now, you deserve access to it. But I am not your husband. I am not your backup plan. And Maris is not your redemption arc. Silence on the line. Not heavy. Not thick with emotion. Just empty. You told the world I wasn't your husband. Remember that? You said I didn't measure up. And now you want a seat at a table you burned to the ground. I let the question hang there. She didn't answer. I built this life without you. And not in spite of you, because of you. Because the moment you exposed who you really were, I stopped living on borrowed worth. And I'll say this once, Letitia, do not come near my family again. A small sniffle crackled through the line. She was crying. I let her. You don't have the right to miss anything here, I said finally, quietly. You made sure of that. Then I ended the call. No yelling. No dramatics. Just the final, surgical removal of a story I never consented to anymore. Rhea was in the hallway when I turned around, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. She hadn't eavesdropped. She didn't need to. She read everything in my eyes. She won't come back, I said. Rhea nodded, walked over, and slipped her arms around me without a word. It was the kind of hug that didn't ask for details. The kind that didn't need explanations. Just presence. Safety. I looked over at the nursery door, slightly ajar. Maris stirred softly in her crib, the faint rhythm of her breathing like a lullaby for the storm in my chest. Letitia could talk all she wanted. She could rewrite the past with eloquence, with apologies wrapped in silk, with versions of us that felt easier to remember than the truth. But the truth was simple. She left, not in body, but in faith, in loyalty, in the quiet moments that should have mattered most. And I didn't need her to admit it anymore. I had my proof, sleeping behind that door, laughing in this hallway, cooking dinner in this kitchen. That silence Rhea and I shared after the call wasn't awkward. It wasn't heavy. It was confirmation. I'd done the right thing. I'd answered the letter not with forgiveness, not with retaliation, but with a boundary she could never cross again. Letitia hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to reclaim. But she didn't realize something. You don't get to call a man yours once he's finally built the life you never stayed long enough to see. We moved a few months later. Not because of Letitia, not entirely. But because the house we were in no longer felt like a beginning. It had become a safe place, yes, but we needed more than safety. We needed space to stretch, to grow deeper roots, to build something without the echo of her shadow brushing against the edges of our peace. So we packed our lives into boxes labeled with names that held real meaning: Maris books, Rhea's mugs, Dad's tools. The we in our home was solid now. It wasn't theoretical. It was lived in, earned. The new place was larger. A modest two-story with a wraparound porch and tall windows that spilled morning light across the hardwood floors. Maris ran through empty rooms with the kind of squeals only toddlers can produce, her socks slipping on freshly polished floors. Rhea watched her with a hand on her belly. Yes, we were expecting again. A son, this time. This new house didn't come with ghosts. It came with plans. I hung family photos on day one. Not just portraits, but moments. Rhea laughing with a paint roller in her hand, Maris asleep in my lap during her first fever, a note Rhea had once left on the fridge that read, "You're enough, even on your worst days." I framed that one. Because it was true. Because she meant it. Because I'd never again forget it. Work had changed too. I was now senior executive of manufacturing strategy, ridiculous title. I know, but it meant something. Not the money. Not the meetings. The fact that I had taken a life defined by limits and redrew its lines. What started as a job on the floor had become a map of every step I refused to skip. And yet, the further I got from that version of me, the man Letitia cast out, the more I saw how necessary it had been. The silence. The loneliness. The rejection. It had all stripped away the illusions. Burned off the need to perform. I wasn't chasing status now. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was simply building. Patiently. Daily. Intentionally. Some nights, I'd walk the perimeter of our backyard, Maris tucked in bed, Rhea reading with her feet on my lap. I'd look out into the trees and whisper, "This is mine. Not the land, not the house, but the life. The peace. The rhythm." Judith texted once. A vague, "Hope you're well" message that landed like a stranger's postcard. No mention of what they'd said, of how quickly they'd folded behind Letitia's lead. No apology. Just a tap on the glass of a window they once slammed shut. I didn't reply, because survival doesn't require confrontation. It requires clarity. I hadn't walked away from family. I had walked towards something stronger. A few of my old co-workers from the floor had reached out too. Jerome even came by the new place once, bringing his daughter and a tray of smoked ribs. We sat on the porch and talked about how far things had come. He looked around and said, "Man, you built a forest out of concrete." That stuck with me, because he was right. The life I had now wasn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It was about proving myself right, that I could be soft without being weak, firm without being cruel, that I could lose everything I thought mattered and still become someone worth loving. Letitia's version of me had died, and I let him stay buried. Some people romanticize the idea of forgiveness, say you can't move on without it. But that's a lie we tell to make healing look prettier than it is. The truth? Some wounds don't need apologies. They need distance. Scar tissue doesn't vanish. It just stops hurting when you stop picking at it. One night, as I tucked Maris in, she asked me, "Were you ever sad before me?" I paused, her tiny hand clutching my shirt. "Yes," I said honestly. "Why?" "Because I didn't know what my family looked like yet." She blinked sleepily, satisfied with that answer, and rolled onto her side, her toy bear tucked under her chin. That was the thing about children. They didn't need all the details. They just needed presence, security, truth that didn't bruise. After she fell asleep, I stepped outside again. The stars hung low that night, scattered like breadcrumbs across a sky I used to stare at alone. But not anymore. Now, there were footsteps behind me, tiny and growing. There was warmth inside, soft and steady. There was purpose ahead, quiet and rooted. I whispered to the trees, "Was the tree ever sad?" And I answered myself, "Not anymore." The tree grew its own forest. Because no one can take away what you've built with your own two hands, especially not the ones who never stayed long enough to water a single seed. Maris turned 5 on a Sunday. The kind of day the sky gets everything right, sunny but not hot, breezy but not cold. She woke us up early, bouncing on the bed, grinning with all her teeth, still in the mismatched pajamas she insisted on wearing the night before. "Is today really mine?" she asked, eyes wide. And I nodded, lifting her in my arms and spinning her once, just to hear that laugh that could pull joy out of the darkest corners of the world. We didn't throw a big party. No rented clowns, no cotton candy machine or magician. Just us. Our family. A few neighbors who had become more like kin, and friends who stuck by when the name Langley was still considered disposable. Rhea baked the cake, chocolate with vanilla swirl frosting, and Maris helped, sneaking fingerfuls of icing when she thought no one was looking. I stood on the porch that afternoon, watching guests arrive, arms full of brightly wrapped gifts and smiles. My son, still crawling, played in a pen nearby, babbling happily. Maris was running through bubbles blown by the neighbor's daughter. And Rhea, my wife in every way that mattered, stood near the drink table, laughing with someone about how fast time flies. And for a moment, I stood still, not because I was frozen, but because I needed to take it all in. This wasn't a scene I'd been handed. This was a life I had chosen, rebuilt, nurtured. Every brick laid by hands once calloused from factory work, now firm from building a home. Then Maris called to me, waving her tiny hands. "Daddy, come sit with me." I walked over and sat cross-legged on the grass next to her. Her curls were tied up with blue ribbons, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she picked at her slice of cake. "Daddy," she said seriously, licking frosting off her finger. "Who's in our family?" I smiled. "What do you think?" She tilted her head like she was counting in her mind. "You, Mommy, baby Nico, me, and Annie Mads, and Uncle Jerome. Sounds right." She paused. "Is anyone not in our family?" I took a deep breath and looked her in the eyes, choosing each word like a promise. "The people who love us on hard days. The ones who stay. That's our family, sweetheart." She grinned, satisfied with the answer. "Then you're my forever daddy." And something inside me cracked wide open and healed all at once. Letitia's name didn't come up. Not because I had erased her, but because she no longer held space here. Not in our conversations. Not in the way we defined love. Not in the walls that held our laughter, or in the quiet moments that taught our daughter what stability felt like. She had tried to write me out of the story years ago, had told the world I wasn't worth keeping around because I worked in a factory, that I had no ambition, that I was the exception among her friends' husbands, the one who hadn't made it. But what she didn't realize, and what I now lived every day, was that ambition doesn't always dress in suits or announce itself in job titles. Sometimes it looks like waking up every day and choosing to be better than the bitterness that tried to swallow you. I hadn't spoken to Letitia since that letter. Not when she tried calling again a year later. Not when Judith emailed with a vague update about her not doing well emotionally. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Forgiveness had come quietly, but it hadn't invited her back in. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't for her. It was for me. For my daughter. For the man I saw in the mirror each morning who now stood taller, not out of pride, but out of peace. Later that evening, after the guests left and Maris was tucked into bed with her new books and stuffed animals, I stood on the back porch with Rhea, a blanket wrapped around both our shoulders. The stars were out again. Always the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "She would never understand this version of you," she said softly. "She never tried to," I replied. We stayed silent a while, listening to the wind move through the trees, to the sound of a home filled with life and small joys. "I'm proud of you," Rhea whispered. And it hit me. Not because I needed it to, but because hearing it from someone who meant it without condition still felt like a balm on skin that once blistered under criticism. "I'm proud of us," I said. Because we had done this together. Through grief, through resilience, through every step of becoming whole without needing permission. That night, as I walked past Maris's room one last time, I peeked inside. She was sleeping, arms around her favorite bear, the word forever stitched onto its little shirt. I smiled, turned off the nightlight, and gently closed the door. When people ask how I made it, how I became who I am, I don't mention job titles or articles or promotions. I tell them the truth. My wife divorced me by group chat. I replied with silence and success. And then I built a life so full, so bright, so steady. She could never touch it again. From the very beginning, I knew I wasn't the son-in-law my in-laws had envisioned for their perfect, delicate daughter. Monica, my wife, had always been their little princess, the center of their world, and to them, I was nothing more than an intrusion, a man who had taken her away from the pedestal they had placed her on since birth. They never said it outright, but their actions spoke louder than any words ever could. No matter how hard I worked, how much I provided, or how much love I poured into our marriage, I was never truly welcomed. At best, they tolerated me. At worst, they ignored me completely, as if my presence in their lives was a necessary evil they had to endure for Monica's sake. If Monica wanted something, she got it. If I wanted something, I was asking for too much. The balance was never in my favor. I told myself it didn't matter, that my marriage was about Monica and me, not her parents. I convinced myself that, over time, they would see me for who I was, that they would recognize the way I loved her, that things would get better. They never did. The signs had been there since the very beginning. The disapproving glances during family dinners, the way her mother, Patricia, would sigh whenever I spoke, the way her father, Gerald, would pat my shoulder with an empty, condescending smile as if to say, "You'll never be enough." The way they looked past me when speaking to Monica, as if I didn't exist at all. It wasn't just the small things, though. There were bigger moments, moments where I should have realized that I was fighting a losing battle, like the time they planned a family vacation and conveniently forgot to invite me. Or when Monica's mother redecorated our home without consulting me, assuming her opinion mattered more than mine. Or the time Gerald dismissed my career, stating outright that I wasn't ambitious enough for their daughter. Monica never defended me. I never knew if it was out of fear, indifference, or simply the fact that, deep down, she agreed with them. And maybe that was the worst part, not their treatment of me, but the fact that my own wife never stood by my side. Still, I endured, because I loved her, because I believed in marriage, because I thought that if I held on long enough, they would finally see that I was worthy of their daughter. But love isn't always enough. And then one night, it all came crashing down. I had just returned from work, exhausted, my mind already fixated on the small comforts of home. The idea of a warm shower, a quiet dinner, and maybe, just maybe, the possibility of a night without tension hanging in the air like an unspoken storm. But as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating. The lights were dim, but Monica wasn't curled up on the couch with a book like she usually was. The house was silent, too silent, except for the faint sound of murmuring voices coming from the living room. My heartbeat quickened, and with every step toward that room, I felt the weight of something heavy settling over me. And then I saw them. Monica, sitting on the couch, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her parents, standing nearby, their faces void of warmth. They weren't just visiting. They were waiting for me. Something about the way they were positioned, the way Monica refused to look at me, made my stomach tighten. I shut the door behind me and placed my keys on the table, keeping my voice steady. "What's going on?" Patricia exchanged a glance with Gerald, and then Monica finally spoke. "We need to talk." A simple phrase, yet so final, so distant. I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. "Okay, I'm listening." Her father took a step forward, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. "You're not a good match for Monica. You never were." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. "Excuse me?" Gerald's voice was steady, as if he had rehearsed this speech many times before. "We've tolerated this marriage for long enough, but it's clear that Monica deserves better. You don't provide the kind of life she needs. You hold her back." My fingers curled into fists at my sides. Hold her back? Monica finally met my gaze, and what I saw in her eyes sent an even deeper pain through me, emptiness. "No one wants you here," she said flatly. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. Surely, she wouldn't say something like that. Surely, the woman I married wouldn't turn her back on me so coldly, so effortlessly. But then Gerald and Patricia nodded in agreement. And I knew. I had never been part of their family. Not really. I swallowed hard, my jaw tightening as I looked at Monica one last time. Is this what you want? I asked. She didn't answer, and that silence was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just turned on my heel, walked upstairs, and packed my bags. Every shirt, every pair of shoes, every last trace of me in that house. I shoved it all into a suitcase, moving on autopilot. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred, but I refused to break down in front of them. When I walked back downstairs, they were still standing there, still watching me like I was a stain they were finally wiping away. Monica said nothing. Patricia sighed in what sounded like relief. Gerald turned his back on me before I even reached the door. I stepped outside, pulling the suitcase behind me, and for the first time since I had married Monica, I felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not heartbreak, but relief. I walked to my car, tossing my bag in the back seat, and sat behind the wheel for a moment, staring at the house that had never truly felt like home. Then, without another glance, without another thought, I started the engine and drove away. And just like that, my marriage was over. It was a Friday night. The kind of night where all I wanted was a little peace. I had spent the entire day grinding at work, dealing with deadlines, office politics, and the usual chaos that came with earning a living. By the time I pulled into the driveway, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. All I wanted was to step inside, take off my shoes, and breathe. Maybe even enjoy a quiet dinner, assuming Monica hadn't already eaten without me, which lately had been the norm. But the moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. The air was too still. No television noise. No clattering from the kitchen. No casual, "Hey, you're home," from Monica. Instead, she was sitting on the couch, her arms tightly crossed over her chest, her face unreadable. The way she was sitting, rigid, upright, told me whatever was happening wasn't good. Then, I saw them. Her parents, Gerald and Patricia, standing near the window, their expressions mirroring hers. Cold, distant, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Something about the way they were positioned, the way Monica refused to meet my eyes, made me uneasy. I closed the door behind me, dropping my keys onto the table with a quiet clink. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady but cautious. Gerald sighed like I was wasting his time. He had always looked at me like I was some charity case Monica had picked up off the street. It didn't matter that I had a stable job. It didn't matter that I had taken care of his daughter, provided for her, made sure she never lacked a thing. In his eyes, I would never be good enough. "We need to talk," Monica finally said. Her voice was clipped, emotionless. I glanced between the three of them, my chest tightening. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm listening." Patricia exhaled, folding her hands in front of her like she was bracing for impact. Gerald, on the other hand, didn't hesitate. "You're not a good match for Monica," he said. "You never were." His words hit harder than I expected. I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. My first instinct was to laugh because surely this was some kind of sick joke. "Excuse me?" I asked, but Gerald didn't waver. "We've tolerated this marriage for long enough," he continued, his tone as sharp as a blade. "But it's clear that Monica deserves better." Deserves better. The phrase bounced around in my head, but before I could even react, Monica finally looked at me. "No one wants you here," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't cruel, but it was final, like a verdict, like a sentence, like I had just been erased. I felt the air leave my lungs. I opened my mouth to speak, to demand an explanation, to ask her how she could say something like that so casually. But then Patricia nodded in agreement. Gerald crossed his arms. Standing beside his wife like this was some group intervention, like I was some kind of burden that they had finally decided to cut loose. And I understood. I had never been part of their family. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. I swallowed hard, my jaw clenching as I looked at Monica. "Is this what you want?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Her gaze flickered for a brief moment. Something in her expression almost looked like guilt. But then she nodded. And that was it. That was the moment I realized I had spent years fighting for a place in a home where I was never welcome. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just walked upstairs. Every step felt heavier than the last. I passed by the wedding pictures on the hallway walls, the smiling images of a man who had once believed in love, in loyalty, in the idea that marriage meant fighting together, not against each other. I had been a fool. I reached the bedroom and grabbed my suitcase. My hands were shaking, but I moved with purpose, with clarity, shoving clothes, shoes, and personal belongings into my bag with calculated precision. No hesitation. No second-guessing. If they wanted me gone, then I would go. By the time I returned downstairs, they were still there. Monica hadn't moved. Patricia was already scrolling through her phone like she had more important things to do. Gerald looked vaguely impatient, like he was waiting for me to finally take the hint and leave. No last words. No apologies. Just silence. I looked at Monica one last time, hoping, maybe foolishly, that she would say something. Anything. But she just turned her head away. And so, I walked out of that house without looking back. The night air was cold as I tossed my bag into the back seat of my car. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my knuckles turning white. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the house that had never truly felt like home. Then, without another glance, I started the engine and drove away. The entire ride was a blur. I don't remember the streets I passed. I don't remember the traffic lights or the way the city looked under the dim glow of street lamps. My mind was somewhere else, stuck in that living room, stuck in the moment when my wife had told me I wasn't wanted. At some point, I found myself in front of a cheap motel. I checked in without thinking, paid for a single night, and carried my bag up to the room. The space was small, cramped, with flickering lights and a bed that looked like it had seen better days. But it was mine. I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the floor, waiting for the heartbreak to come, waiting for the pain, waiting for the regret. But instead, I felt relief. A weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about pleasing Monica, about proving myself to her parents, about shrinking myself down just to be tolerated. I was done trying. That night, I had the best sleep I'd had in years. No tension. No walking on eggshells. No Monica. No in-laws. Just silence. And then, the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 29 missed calls. I walked out of that house without looking back. No goodbyes. No last words. Just the cold realization that I had wasted years of my life trying to fit into a place where I was never truly welcome. I had driven for what felt like hours, though in reality, it had only been 30 minutes before I found myself pulling into a motel parking lot. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting a dull glow onto the cracked pavement. It wasn't glamorous, but it would do. I didn't need comfort. I just needed distance. I checked in without thinking, barely paying attention to the bored-looking receptionist who slid a key card across the counter. The room was small, with stiff furniture and a bed that creaked when I sat on it, but I didn't care. I dropped my suitcase onto the floor, exhaled, and let my body sink into the mattress. For the first time in years, I was alone. And for the first time in years, I felt free. There was no tension hanging over me like a storm cloud. No walking on eggshells around Gerald and Patricia. No pretending I didn't hear the passive-aggressive comments from Monica when she thought I wasn't doing enough, wasn't trying enough, wasn't good enough. It was just me. And the silence. I waited for the sadness to come. I expected to feel some kind of deep, crushing sorrow, the kind that usually comes with the end of a marriage. But instead, I felt something else. Relief. I should have felt heartbroken. I should have been angry. But I wasn't. Instead, I lay back on the bed and let out a long breath. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning. That night, I had the best sleep I'd had in years. No nightmares. No waking up to Monica's cold indifference. Just peace. But then, morning came, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I squinted at the screen, still groggy from sleep. 29 missed calls. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe work needed me. Maybe it was an emergency from a friend. Then I saw the names. Monica, Patricia, Gerald. My lips curled in amusement. Now they cared? I ignored the calls, tossed the phone onto the nightstand, and let it ring. Then, The text messages started. Monica, you're being dramatic. Come back home. Patricia, enough of this nonsense. Stop acting like a child. Gerald, this is bigger than you. You need to come back. I laughed bitterly. Bigger than me? Funny. When they sat me down in that living room and told me I wasn't wanted, that wasn't bigger than me. That was fine. That was acceptable. That was normal. But now that I was gone, suddenly there was a problem? I ignored them. Then, Monica sent the text that caught my attention. Monica, come home now. We have a problem. I raised an eyebrow. A problem? Curiosity got the best of me. I finally texted back just 2 words. What happened? Her reply came almost instantly. Monica, my father screwed up. Bad. Now this was interesting. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Gerald, the same man who practically kicked me out, was now in some kind of trouble? I could only imagine what it was. A financial issue? A business failure? An affair gone public? The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in a while, I found myself entertained by their misfortune. Still, I didn't reply. I let them sweat. I went about my morning like nothing had happened, took a long shower, had a mediocre cup of motel coffee, sat in the stiff chair by the window and just watched the world outside, taking my time. My phone continued to buzz. Monica, this isn't funny. Pick up your phone. Gerald, we don't have time for this. Get back here now. Patricia, we need your help. And then, finally, the bombshell. Monica, my father's been arrested. I sat up, grinning. Now they needed me. Oh, how the tables had turned. I could only imagine Gerald sitting in a holding cell, fuming, his pride in tatters. The same man who had spent years making me feel like an outsider, like I was some kind of stray dog his daughter had foolishly taken in, was now reaching out to me for help. I stretched out in my chair, feeling more at ease than I had in years. They had spent so long pushing me aside. Now, they were desperate. I could picture Monica pacing in the living room, her mother probably crying at the kitchen table, both of them realizing that the one person they had discarded might be the only one who could fix this mess. But here's the thing. I didn't owe them anything. Not my sympathy. Not my time. Not my effort. They made their choice when they told me I wasn't wanted. And now, it was my turn to show them what that really meant. I grabbed my phone, smirking as I typed out a single, deliberate response. Figure it out without me. Then, I turned off my phone, leaned back, and enjoyed my first real morning of freedom. I sat in that motel room, staring at my phone, watching as the notifications kept rolling in. Calls, texts, desperate messages. It was almost funny how quickly things had changed. Yesterday, I was an inconvenience, an outsider, the unwanted husband who had been barely tolerated, never truly accepted. Today, they needed me. I ignored them for hours, let them stew in their own mess. At first, I thought maybe they would give up, but then the texts became more frantic. Monica, you're being petty. This isn't about you. Patricia, enough is enough. You need to come home. Gerald, if you have any decency left, you'll help us. Decency? Now that was ironic. Where was their decency when they sat me down like an unwanted guest and told me I wasn't good enough? Where was their decency when they let me pack my bags, walk out the door, and never once tried to stop me? I wasn't the one who abandoned them. They abandoned me. And now, because Gerald had been arrested, they wanted me back? I took my time. I left my phone on silent, stepped out of the motel, and walked to a nearby cafe. The sun was warm against my face, the scent of fresh coffee drifting in the air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. No expectations, no responsibilities, no one breathing down my neck, telling me I wasn't enough. I sat at a small table by the window, sipping my coffee, watching the world move around me. It was strange how peaceful everything felt despite the chaos waiting for me on the other side of my phone screen. A few hours passed. Then, Monica sent the text that caught my attention. Monica, come home now. We have a problem. I stared at the words for a long moment, debating whether or not to respond. A problem. Now that was interesting. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't reaching out because they suddenly cared about me. They weren't texting because they had realized their mistake. They just needed something. Probably money. Probably help. And I had a choice. I could walk away, ignore them, let them handle their own mess. Or I could let them suffer for a little while longer. I decided to text back. What happened? Monica's response came almost instantly. Monica, my father screwed up. Bad. I took another sip of my coffee, leaning back in my chair. I knew Gerald had skeletons in his closet. He always acted like he was some flawless, successful businessman. But I had seen the cracks in his perfect image long before now. The hushed phone calls, the tension in his voice, the way Patricia always seemed nervous when money was brought up. I just never thought it would all come crashing down this fast. I let her sweat for a bit, didn't reply. The messages kept coming. Monica, he's been arrested. Monica, we need your help. Patricia, we don't have time for this. You're still family. Gerald, be a man and step up. I almost laughed out loud. Be a man and step up? This was the same man who couldn't wait to get rid of me, and now he was telling me to step up? I let my fingers hover over the keyboard, debating what to say. Then, with a smirk, I typed, "Figure it out without me." And I turned off my phone. I finished my coffee slowly, taking my time, enjoying the quiet, because I knew this was only the beginning. I let them sweat. I turned my phone off and went about my day like their little family crisis didn't exist. And honestly, it felt good. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix things, wasn't bending over backward to prove my worth to people who had never valued me in the first place. I walked through the streets with a newfound sense of freedom, breathing in the crisp air, stopping at a park just to sit on a bench and do nothing. No Monica, no in-laws, just me, finally existing without the weight of their judgment crushing my shoulders. But I wasn't naive. I knew they wouldn't stop. People like Gerald and Patricia weren't used to being ignored. They weren't used to being desperate. So I turned my phone back on just to see how much they had spiraled. I wasn't disappointed. Dozens of missed calls. A flood of text messages. Monica, you're being ridiculous. Just come home. Patricia, I can't believe you're doing this to us. Gerald, enough of your tantrum. We need to talk. A tantrum? That was rich, coming from the people who sat me down like a problem to be discarded just days ago. I kept scrolling, and then I saw the message that made me grin. Monica, my father's been arrested. I chuckled under my breath, shaking my head. It wasn't even shocking. Gerald had always walked around like a king, acting like rules didn't apply to him, like his wealth and influence would protect him no matter what. But here's the thing about men like him. They always fall. And when they do, it's never graceful. I leaned back on the bench, letting the afternoon sun warm my skin, debating what to do next. I could ignore them, let them deal with it on their own. But where was the fun in that? Instead, I decided to let them suffer just a little bit longer. 5 more hours. That's how long I made them wait. By the time I finally responded, the desperation in Monica's texts had reached new heights. Monica, please, just answer me. Patricia, this is serious. He's in jail. Monica, we need money for bail. There it was. Money. It was never really about me. Never about wanting me back. They just needed a wallet. I smirked as I finally typed out a response. Not my problem. The reply came instantly. Monica, are you serious? Monica, this is my father we're talking about. Monica, you're my husband. You can't just walk away. That last one almost made me laugh. Husband? Since when? I thought I was the unwanted one. I thought I wasn't good enough for their perfect little family. Now suddenly, I was supposed to play the role of the loyal spouse just because their world was crumbling? I let the phone ring a few more times before finally picking up. What do you want? I said, my voice calm. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Finally, Monica breathed out, frustration thick in her voice. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said, though I was far from interested. You need to come home, she said. I scoffed. No, I really don't. She exhaled sharply. Stop acting like a child. My father's been arrested, and we need to get him out. We. I repeated mockingly. Last I checked, I wasn't part of your family anymore. That's what you and your parents wanted, right? Silence. Then, her voice softened. Please, this is serious. Now that was something I had never heard before. Monica? Saying please? I almost felt bad for her. Almost. And what exactly do you need from me? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She hesitated, and then finally said it. Money. For bail. Bingo. Ah, I said, dragging out the word. So this is about money. Not about me. Just about what I can give you. That's not fair, she snapped. This is family. I grinned. Funny how I wasn't family 2 days ago when you told me no one wanted me around. More silence. She had no argument. Because there wasn't one. You don't understand, she tried again. My father is in real trouble. Good, I said, my voice void of sympathy. Maybe he'll finally learn what it's like to be powerless. Her breath hitched. You don't mean that. I absolutely do. She let out a frustrated groan. I can't believe you're doing this. I smirked. Believe it. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I added, figure it out without me, just like you always wanted. Then, before she could say another word, I hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment, watching as more texts flooded in. Monica was panicking. Patricia was begging. Gerald was still silent, probably because he had no access to a phone from behind bars. I could have helped them. I could have sent the money, bailed Gerald out, and gone back to being the puppet they had always expected me to be. But I wasn't that man anymore. They had made their bed, and now they could lie in it. I took my time. Monica had called me 7 more times after I hung up, and each one went unanswered. Her mother, Patricia, had sent an embarrassing number of text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Gerald, the man who had never once respected me, the man who had looked down on me like I was some stray dog his daughter had foolishly married, had finally broken his silence. His message? Gerald, we don't have time for your childish tantrum. Be a man and help your family. I stared at the text for a long moment, chuckling under my breath. Be a man. It was funny, really. This was the same man who had spent years belittling me, acting as if I would never measure up to the kind of man Monica deserved. The same man who, just 2 days ago, had told me to my face that I wasn't good enough. Now, I was supposed to step in and rescue him. And he still had the nerve to act like he was doing me a favor by letting me help. I put my phone down and went about my day. Took a long, leisurely shower. Ordered some room service. Sat by the motel window with a coffee in hand, watching the world go by as if my in-laws' entire reality wasn't crumbling. It wasn't until late afternoon that I finally decided to make my next move. I got in my car and drove. But I didn't go straight to their house. No, I made them wait. Took a few detours. Stopped at a gas station, grabbed a bottle of water, took my sweet time doing anything but rushing. By the time I finally pulled into the driveway, the energy had shifted. Gone were the smug, superior expressions. Gone was the overconfidence. Now, they were desperate. Gerald was pacing outside, his hands clenched into fists, his face twisted in barely controlled frustration. Patricia was sitting on the porch steps, her hands shaking as she gripped her phone like it was her lifeline. Monica stood by the door, her arms crossed, her entire body tense. As soon as I stepped out of the car, all 3 of them turned to look at me. Where the hell have you been? Gerald barked, his voice sharp, like he had any authority over me. I smirked. Not here. Like you wanted. His jaw ticked. Patricia stood up quickly, her face lined with stress. Listen, we don't have time for games. You know why we called you. I nodded, casually shutting my car door. Oh, I know. Monica took a step forward, her voice softer, almost pleading. We need you. Now that was something I had never heard before. I folded my arms. You need me? Monica swallowed, hesitating. Yes. I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying the way they all squirmed. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice slow, deliberate. You told me I was unwanted. You let your father insult me. You let your mother treat me like an outsider. But now that Gerald is in trouble, you suddenly remember I exist? Monica exhaled sharply. It's different now. I raised an eyebrow. Is it? Gerald stepped forward, his frustration boiling over. This is about family. I laughed. Loud. Mocking. Oh, now we're family? I shook my head, letting out a low whistle. That's funny, because 2 nights ago, I was a burden, remember? Gerald's face darkened. But before he could say anything, Patricia cut in. We'll pay you back, she said quickly. We just need the money for bail. It's just temporary. I looked at Monica. You agree with them? She hesitated before nodding. It's my father. Of course I do. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the reality of the situation sink in. I had spent years breaking my back for these people, trying, fighting, begging for a place at a table where I was never welcome. And now, after everything, they still didn't want me back. They just wanted my money. No, I finally said. Monica blinked. What? I said no. Gerald clenched his fists. Don't be a fool. You know how serious this is. I do, I said with a nod. And it's not my problem. Monica's eyes widened, genuine panic flashing across her face. You can't just walk away. I smiled. Sure I can. We're your family. Patricia tried again. I tilted my head. Am I? Because that's not what you told me the other night. Silence. For the first time in his miserable life, Gerald looked defeated. Monica looked like she wanted to cry. Patricia's face was pale. Her lips parted in shock. They had expected me to roll over, to be the good, obedient husband they could use when it was convenient. But that wasn't who I was anymore. You'll regret this, Gerald finally said, his voice low. I shrugged. No, Gerald. You will. I turned on my heel and walked back to my car, feeling lighter than I had in years. I could hear Monica calling after me, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. I got in, shut the door, and pulled out of the driveway. And for the first time since I had married into that family, I felt something new. Power. The power to say no. The power to finally put myself first. The power to let them burn in their own mistakes. And God, it felt good. I didn't look back. As I drove away from that house, their house, not mine, I could still hear Monica's voice calling after me. There was a time when that voice could stop me in my tracks, when I would have turned around immediately, desperate to fix whatever problem they had. Not anymore. This time, I kept driving. This time, I let them drown. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the road ahead, and for the first time in years, I actually felt like I was heading towards something better instead of just trying to survive in a life that never truly belonged to me. I didn't regret saying no. I didn't regret the look of pure horror on Patricia's face, or the way Gerald clenched his fists, realizing that his golden reputation couldn't save him this time. For once, they had no control. For once, I was the one holding the cards. And it felt incredible. Still, I knew Monica wasn't done. They weren't the type to accept defeat so easily. I pulled into a small diner, ordered myself a meal I actually enjoyed for once. Not some overpriced, pretentious dish Monica insisted on, and sat by the window as I checked my phone. Just as expected, they had kept going. New messages flooded in, one after another. Monica, you left? Are you serious? Patricia, don't do this. We'll talk. Just help us first. Gerald, you'll regret this. Mark my words. I smirked at that last one. Gerald, still thinking he could intimidate me, even from jail. I ignored all of them and took my time eating. For the first time in ages, food actually tasted good, probably because I wasn't swallowing it down in the presence of people who constantly made me feel like I didn't belong. Then, just as I was finishing my coffee, Monica sent a new message. This one was different. Monica, please. We'll apologize. Just help us. I stared at the text for a long moment, tapping my fingers against the table. This was new. They had never apologized for anything. Ever. Not for the way they treated me. Not for the years of silent judgment, the constant condescension, the dismissive way they talked about my career, my ambitions, my worth. But now, Monica was willing to say the word. Sorry. Because they needed something. I thought about it. I let the idea roll around in my head for a few minutes. Then, I made a decision. I would help them, but on my terms. I typed out a response, each word carefully chosen. I want a public apology in the family group chat. A full-blown confession, not just to me, but to everyone. To her extended family, to their friends, to anyone who had ever thought they were better than me. Monica saw the message immediately. The dots appeared as she started typing, then disappeared. She was hesitating. Of course she was. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about pride. But the silence only lasted a few minutes before she caved. Monica, fine. And then, just like that, the message popped up in the group chat. It was Patricia who sent it. Patricia, we have wronged my name. We treated him poorly, and now, when we need him the most, we realize how unfair we have been. If he chooses to forgive us, we will be grateful. If he doesn't, we understand why. It was humiliating for them. Exactly what I wanted. Now, I had the satisfaction of knowing that every single person who had once judged me, every aunt, uncle, and family friend who had looked at me like I wasn't good enough, now knew the truth. I let them think I would send the money. I let them sit in that humiliation for a full hour. Then, I typed my final response. No, just one word. Simple. Final. And then I blocked all of them. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was over. Gerald stayed in jail. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Blocking them was the most satisfying thing I had ever done. For years, I had been their punching bag, the man they dismissed and ignored until they needed something from me. Now, they were powerless. No money, no favors, no control over me. I sat in the diner for a while, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I didn't care. I was savoring this moment, the feeling of complete and total freedom. They had wanted me gone. Now, they had gotten exactly that. I thought about what was happening back at their house. The frantic phone calls, the panic, Monica pacing up and down, probably furious at herself for sending that apology in the group chat. They had swallowed their pride, thinking it would get them what they wanted. And in the end, it had gotten them nothing. I took a deep breath and let out a slow exhale. This was peace. This was what it felt like to finally be done with people who never valued me. But even as I sat there, my phone buzzing every few minutes from unknown numbers, I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. People like Gerald and Patricia never did. They were too used to getting their way, too used to controlling everything around them. And now, for the first time, they had lost. I could only imagine the scene at their house. Patricia sitting at the kitchen table, crying, Gerald pacing like a caged lion, and Monica desperately trying to come up with a new plan. I smirked as I imagined the frustration in Gerald's face, his ego crumbling under the weight of his own failure. He had always acted like he was invincible, like he could never be touched. Now, he was rotting in a jail cell. And I was sitting here, drinking coffee, watching the world move on without them. Then came the best message yet. A new unknown number popped up. Gerald, when I get out, you better pray I don't find you. I burst out laughing. That was it? That was his big threat? Even now, even after everything, he still thought he had power over me? I typed back a simple response. Strong words for someone who needs my help. Try again. And then I blocked the number. I could only imagine his rage when he saw that message. It must have killed him, knowing that I had one, that I was free, while he was the one trapped, powerless, dependent on the same man he had spent years belittling. Poetic justice. I smiled to myself, left a tip on the table, and walked out of the diner. The night air was cool, crisp, refreshing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. I wasn't bending over backward, trying to prove myself to a family that never wanted me. I wasn't tolerating insults, pretending not to hear the whispers, or shrinking myself to fit into a place that had never been meant for me. I was free, and they would never forget it. The silence was refreshing. I hadn't realized how heavy the weight of my in-laws had been on my shoulders until I finally cut them off. It was like I had been carrying a burden for years, and now, for the first time, I could walk without dragging their expectations behind me. The world felt different, lighter, brighter, but I knew it wasn't over. People like Gerald and Patricia never learned their lessons the first time. They had spent their entire lives controlling others, bending people to their will. And now, they were the ones drowning. It must have driven Gerald insane. Sitting in a jail cell, powerless, while I, the man he had belittled for years, ignored him like he was nothing. Because that's what he was now. Nothing to me. I had given them a chance. I had made them beg, made them apologize publicly, humiliated them in front of their extended family. And yet, even after all of that, they had still thought they could intimidate me. The moment Gerald sent that pathetic threat, "When I get out, you better pray I don't find you," I knew he hadn't changed. So I blocked his number. And I knew that must have killed him inside. I pictured him, sitting in that cold, cramped jail cell, gripping his cheap plastic phone with frustration burning through his veins. He wasn't used to being ignored. He wasn't used to being the one pleading for help. And yet, here we were. I drove around for a while, letting the events of the past few days settle in my mind. I had left my old life behind, and I had no intention of returning, but I wasn't finished with them. Not yet. I checked my phone again. More missed calls. More text from Monica and Patricia, all from new numbers since I had already blocked their original ones. "Monica, I can't believe you're doing this. Patricia, we're really struggling. Please, just this once. Gerald's lawyer. Your family needs you to help with Gerald's case. He won't last long in there." I laughed at the last one. Gerald's lawyer was texting me now? I could only imagine the desperation in that conversation. Try calling him again. He'll pick up. He blocked us. What? Try another number. He blocked those two. They had spent years making sure I knew I wasn't part of their family. Now, they had no choice but to crawl back to me. And that's when I decided. I was going to give them a lesson they'd never forget. I typed out a single message in the family group chat, the same one where Patricia had humiliated herself by admitting they had wronged me. "I'll help you, but only under one condition." Immediately, Monica responded. "Monica, anything. Just say it." I grinned. "I want a public apology. A real one. I want Gerald to go on record admitting everything he's done to me. I want it in writing. I want it in the newspaper. I want it posted online. I want the whole world to know the kind of man he really is." The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. Then, silence. I could practically hear Gerald's rage through the screen. He would never allow it. His reputation was everything to him. But now, his freedom depended on it. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then, finally, "Monica, you're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Me? You have no idea." I turned off my phone, leaned back in my seat, and smiled. Because no matter what happened next, I had already won. I sat in my car, watching as my phone screen remained empty. No new messages. No more calls. I had given them their final chance, an opportunity to make things right, to admit the truth. And they couldn't do it. Not that I was surprised. People like Gerald and Patricia were too proud, too used to getting their way. They had built their entire lives on control, manipulation, and appearances. The idea of making a public confession, of exposing their own hypocrisy, was simply unthinkable to them. And yet, they had expected me to fix their problems. That was the funniest part. Even after everything, even after throwing me away like I was nothing, they still believed I owed them something. But I didn't. Not anymore. And now? Now, they were truly on their own. I let out a slow breath and finally turned my phone off for good. No more waiting. No more games. I had given them every opportunity to make things right, and they had failed. That was the end of it. It was time to move forward. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't chained to that house, to that family, to a woman who never truly loved me. I was free, and I wasn't going to waste that freedom. I had spent years trying to belong, fighting for a place in their world. But the truth was, I had been building my life in the wrong place. They had never been my family. But now, I had the chance to start fresh. No more proving myself. No more waiting for approval that was never coming. Just me, living life on my own terms. And as I drove away, leaving that chapter behind for good, I smiled. Because I knew they would never forget me. And that That was the best revenge of all. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming, that I noticed the red flags, that I was smart enough to dodge the disaster that was Sophia before it ever touched my life. But I didn't. I walked into that marriage blind, convinced I was making the best decision of my life. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not the betrayal, not the court battle, not the smug boyfriend, but the fact that, once upon a time, I genuinely believed I had it all. Sophia and I met 7 years ago. It wasn't one of those whirlwind romances where you get lost in passion overnight. No, it was slow, steady, the kind of relationship that felt solid, dependable. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot. And when I proposed, I did it with my whole heart. Not a single hesitation. Back then, I had no doubts about her. None. She was sweet, lively, the kind of woman who made conversations flow effortlessly. She had this charm that made people like her within minutes. My parents adored her. My mother, Linda, loved that she was always up for girl talk over coffee. My dad, Paul, appreciated that she could sit through a football game and act interested. That should have been my first warning sign. She was too good at playing a role, too smooth at winning people over. The only one who wasn't completely fooled? My sister, Claire. She was skeptical from the start. Not in a loud, overbearing way, but in those subtle, quiet observations that I chose to ignore. She likes nice things, Nathan, Claire once said. Too much. The way she talks about money, about what she wants from life. It's not about building together. It's about getting what she thinks she deserves. I laughed her off. Because I love Sophia. And love makes you stupid. Sophia worked part-time at a boutique before we got married. Nothing serious, just a job she took for extra spending money. But after the wedding, that job disappeared. She said she needed time to figure herself out. Whatever that meant, I was fine with it at first. I had a solid job in real estate sales. I wasn't rolling in millions, but I could afford a comfortable life. I had already bought a house before we got married. A modest but nice place. My father co-signed the loan to help with interest rates, but I made every single payment. That house? It was mine. Not ours. Mine. I didn't say it out loud at the time because I didn't think it mattered. I was married. What was mine was hers, right? That was my second mistake. For the first few months, everything felt normal. Sophia played the role of a loving wife well. She'd cook sometimes, though she preferred takeout. She'd do the laundry, though she often complained about how tiring it was. She acted like she was contributing, but really, she was just existing in a home that I paid for, living a life I provided. I ignored the small signs. How she'd always talk about wanting a bigger house, a nicer car, a vacation to Europe, things that didn't fit our actual budget. How she'd get irritated when I reminded her that I was the only one working. How she'd scoff when I'd suggest she think about going back to work. I'm not going to take just any job, Nathan. I want to find something that makes me happy. Fair enough. But months turned into a year. A year turned into 2. And somehow, she never found that mythical job that would bring her fulfillment. At first, I thought it was just a phase. I told myself she'd come around, that she just needed time. Because that's what a good husband does, right? He supports his wife. He trusts her. But there was always that nagging feeling. That tiny voice in the back of my head whispering, she's not looking for a career. She's looking for an easy life. Then, little by little, the changes started. She stopped being as affectionate. She started going out more often. At first, it was occasional, lunches with friends, shopping trips. Then it became late nights, unexplained outings. I just need space, she'd say. You're acting like I have to be glued to you 24/7. I wasn't. I just wanted to know why my wife suddenly needed so much space. It was Claire who saw it first. Something's off, Nathan. She's distracted, like she's mentally checked out of this marriage. Are you sure everything's okay? I lied. I told her things were fine. Because, deep down, I didn't want to admit that maybe she was right. The first real gut punch came one night when Sophia came home at 2 a.m. I was waiting in the living room. I wasn't angry. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I just wanted answers. Where were you? I asked. She froze. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see the truth flash across her face. Then she flipped. Are you seriously waiting up for me? Am I not allowed to have a life outside of this house? You're so paranoid, Nathan. It's suffocating. She stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door, leaving me sitting there, staring at the spot where she'd been standing. Something shifted that night. It was like I had been sleepwalking through my own marriage, and suddenly, I was wide awake. But I still wasn't ready to face the truth. Not yet. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. No apology. No explanation. She kissed my cheek, made coffee, and scrolled through her phone like she hadn't just gaslit me into questioning my own sanity the night before. I let it go, because that's what I always did. And that was my biggest mistake. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the one where I let her rewrite reality, where I let her convince me that I was the problem, that was the beginning of the end. Not the night I found the texts. Not the divorce battle. Not the judge's final ruling. No, the real destruction started the moment I stopped trusting myself. And once you lose that, you've already lost everything. You ever have one of those moments where you feel like the ground beneath you isn't as solid as you thought? Like you've been standing on what you assumed was rock, only to realize it's quicksand, pulling you under inch by inch? That's what the next phase of my marriage felt like. At first, it was subtle. Little things that were easy to dismiss, easy to explain away. Maybe she was just in a mood. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But then, the little things became bigger things. Sophia started going out more often. At first, it was normal, grabbing lunch with friends, going shopping, the kind of stuff she had always done. But then, the outings started lasting longer. It was just a late dinner, she'd say. You're acting like I was out all night. Except sometimes, she was out all night. It started with excuses. I had too much to drink, so I crashed at Hannah's place. Or, it was just a girls' night, nothing serious. And the first few times, I let it go. Because that's what you do when you trust someone, right? But then came the night she didn't come home at all. No call, no text, nothing. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my phone to buzz. It didn't. The next morning, just as the sun was rising, the front door creaked open. I got up, walked to the living room, and there she was, hair messy, makeup smudged, wearing the same clothes she had left in. Where were you? I asked, my voice flat. She barely glanced at me as she kicked off her heels. I told you, I was with friends. Why are you making this a big deal? Because you didn't come home, Sophia. She sighed, rubbing her temples like I was the problem. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I just needed some space, Nathan. You act like I owe you a minute-by-minute breakdown of my life. And that was the first time I felt it, the cold distance. Like she wasn't my wife anymore. Like she was already somewhere else, mentally, emotionally. Like I was talking to a stranger who happened to be wearing my wife's face. And yet, I still didn't call it what it was. Not yet. My sister, Claire, saw it before I did. She's acting different, Nathan. She's just been stressed, I muttered. No, Claire said, shaking her head. She's checked out. She doesn't look at you the same way anymore. I hated hearing it, but deep down, I knew Claire was right. The problem was, I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Instead, I tried harder. I planned date nights. She canceled them. I tried talking to her. She brushed me off. I asked if she was okay. She rolled her eyes. Every effort I made was met with indifference. And the worst part? She didn't even pretend to care. One night, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a photo tagged from a bar downtown. It was Sophia, smiling, holding a cocktail. Her caption? Living my best life. What caught my attention wasn't the post itself, but the people in the background. One guy, tall, dark-haired, was standing way too close to her. His hand was on the small of her back, fingers just slightly grazing the fabric of her dress. It was an intimate touch, not one you give to a friend. My stomach clenched. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. I debated calling her, texting her, confronting her. But then I realized something. I was afraid of the answer. Because if I asked, if I forced the truth out of her, then I had to do something about it. And I wasn't ready for that yet. So, I put my phone down. And for the first time in my life, I felt helpless. The final straw came 2 weeks later. It was 2 a.m. again. I was sitting in the living room, waiting, just like before. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just tired. When Sophia finally walked in, she froze. She wasn't expecting me to be awake. That's when I knew. Because guilt is a weird thing. It shows up in the smallest, quickest moments, a flicker of the eyes, a half-second of hesitation, and I saw it all over her face. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice calm. She dropped her purse on the counter, sighing dramatically. "Nathan, can we not do this?" "Do what?" "This interrogation every time I go out. It's exhausting." "It's exhausting?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You disappear all night, and I'm the exhausting one?" She scoffed. "Not even a trace of guilt anymore. Just irritation. I don't have to explain myself to you." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in anger. Not in sadness. Just clarity. Because I finally understood. She wasn't here anymore. And she wasn't coming back. That night, after she went to bed, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, replaying every moment in my head. Every excuse, every lie, every shift in her behavior. The woman I married? She didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. And for the first time, I stopped trying to fix it. I just sat there, accepting what I had refused to see for so long. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was just a waiting game. Waiting for the truth to surface. Waiting for her to finally admit it. Waiting for everything to fall apart completely. I didn't know how much worse it was going to get. But I knew one thing for sure. The woman sleeping in my bed? She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just a stranger wearing a ring she no longer cared about. And I was just a man too tired to keep pretending. You know how people say that when something terrible happens, you can feel it in your gut before you even see the proof? That's exactly what it was like. I knew Sophia was cheating before I ever saw the texts. I just didn't want to believe it. I had spent months watching her pull away, treating me like an inconvenience rather than a husband. I had spent sleepless nights waiting for her to come home, asking questions she refused to answer, being made to feel like a paranoid fool for even wondering what was happening. But deep down, I already knew. And then, one day, I had proof. It was a Sunday morning. She was in the shower, steam pouring from the bathroom like nothing in the world was wrong. And her phone? It was sitting on the kitchen counter, unlocked. Now, I know what people say. Never go through your partner's phone. If you have to check, you've already lost trust. Yeah, well, trust had left this marriage a long time ago. So I picked it up. I didn't even have to scroll. The first name at the top of her messages? Brandon. Not Hannah, not Julie, not any of the so-called girlfriends she was always out with. No, Brandon. And the moment I clicked on that thread, my stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might actually throw up. The messages weren't even subtle. There were pictures, ones I can never unsee. There were texts describing things she would never say to me, things she clearly enjoyed doing for him. There was a back-and-forth conversation planning their next night together. While I had been home alone, wondering if my wife was okay, I felt sick. Not just because of what I was reading, but because of what it confirmed. This wasn't some recent mistake. This wasn't an impulsive one-time thing. This had been going on for months. While I was waiting up for her. While I was trying to fix things. While I was still fighting for a marriage she had already abandoned. I put the phone down, walked to the sink, gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. And then, I took a deep breath. Because I had a choice to make. I could confront her right there and then, storm into the bathroom, throw her phone at the wall, demand an explanation I already knew she'd never give. Or, I could play the long game. I could be smart. I waited. Not for long. Just until she walked out of the bathroom, hair wrapped in a towel, humming like nothing was wrong. I was sitting at the dining table, arms crossed, staring at her phone. She noticed immediately. And she froze. Right there. That split second of hesitation, that was the moment she knew. That was the moment she realized the game was up. "What?" she asked, forcing a casual smile. I tapped her phone. "Who's Brandon?" I'll never forget the way her entire face changed. Gone was the casual smirk. Gone was the attitude, the dismissiveness. Gone was the carefully constructed image she had built. And for just a second, she looked scared. Not sad. Not guilty. Scared. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. And just like that, she flipped the script. "Oh my God, Nathan. Are you seriously going through my phone?" Not an apology. Not an explanation. No. She was offended. She actually had the audacity to be angry at me. "That's a complete invasion of my privacy," she continued, voice rising. "How dare you? How dare I? How dare I?" I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. "That's what you're worried about? Not the fact that you've been screwing some other guy, but the fact that I found out?" Her expression twisted into something ugly. "Oh, don't be dramatic." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Dramatic?" I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. "You're cheating on me, but I'm the dramatic one?" She rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes. "We were falling apart anyway, Nathan. Be honest. You knew that." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So that's your excuse?" I asked. "You felt things were off, so instead of talking to me, you just went and found someone else?" She shrugged. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I needed more than what this marriage was giving me. That's when I knew. This wasn't salvageable. There was no coming back from this. So I did the only thing I could do. I stepped aside and pointed at the door. "Get out." She scoffed. "Seriously? You're kicking me out over one mistake?" I smiled. I don't think I had ever smiled so coldly in my entire life. "One mistake?" I repeated. "I saw the messages, Sophia. I saw how long this has been going on. It wasn't one mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again. And now I'm making mine." She hesitated for a second. I could see it. She thought she could talk her way out of this. She thought she could manipulate me, the way she had for months. But not this time. I was done. She grabbed her phone, stormed past me, and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard drawers opening, the sound of her shoving clothes into a bag. Then, minutes later, she walked past me again. Her face unreadable, her bag slung over her shoulder. At the door, she turned. "You're going to regret this." I didn't even flinch. "No," I said. "I'm finally free." And then she was gone. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in months, the house felt quiet. Not empty, not broken, just quiet. Because for the first time, I wasn't drowning in uncertainty. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for answers that would never come. For the first time, I knew exactly where I stood. I was done, and the real war was just about to begin. If I thought the worst was over after Sophia walked out that door, I was wrong. So wrong. Because leaving wasn't enough for her. No, she wanted to destroy me on her way out. I expected anger. I expected backlash. Hell, I expected her to try and twist things in her favor. What I didn't expect was how fast she moved. Less than a week after she left, I got a letter from a lawyer. Sophia had filed for divorce. Not a mutual, clean split. A full-on war declaration. The demands? Insane. She wanted half of my house, the house I bought before the marriage. Half of my savings, money she had never contributed to. Half of my car's value, even though the car was paid off long before I met her. Monthly spousal support, because, according to her, she had sacrificed her career for our marriage. And the kicker? Her new boyfriend, Brandon, was sitting beside her at mediation, smirking like he had just won the lottery. I wish I could say I kept my cool, that I walked into that room calm, confident, untouchable. But no, when I saw her sitting there with him, acting like they were some power couple about to bleed me dry, I almost lost it. My lawyer, Jacob, must have sensed it because he leaned in and whispered, "Breathe, we're going to shut this down." And for the first time since this nightmare started, I trusted someone else to fight for me, because I wasn't just going to roll over and let them take everything I worked for. The first mediation session was a joke. Sophia played the helpless victim. "I gave up my career for our marriage," she sniffled, dabbing at non-existent tears. Jacob calmly laid out the truth. "Your Honor, my client's wife quit her job before the wedding. She made a personal choice not to seek employment for years, despite encouragement. My client provided for the household entirely on his own. She was not a stay-at-home spouse managing a home or children. There are no children involved. She simply did not work. The mediator nodded. Point for us. Sophia glared at me, realizing this wasn't going to be as easy as she thought. Brandon? Still smirking. He actually leaned over and whispered to her, loud enough for me to hear. We got this, babe. He'll have to pay up. I clenched my jaw. Jacob? Didn't even flinch. Your Honor, he continued, flipping through papers. Regarding the house, we have the purchase agreement and mortgage records proving my client bought it before the marriage. Under state law, premarital assets are separate property unless commingled, which this was not. Sophia's lawyer tried to argue. Tried. He made mortgage payments during the marriage, making it joint property, the guy pushed. Jacob raised an eyebrow. With whose income? Only my client's. And all payments came from an account in his name alone. Boom. Case law backed us. Sophia's lawyer looked visibly uncomfortable. Sophia, meanwhile, was seething. Then came the savings battle. Sophia's argument? I contributed emotionally to this marriage. That counts for something. Even the mediator blinked at that one. Jacob, flipping through another document. We have account records showing that throughout the marriage, the wife withdrew money but never deposited a single cent. There is no legal precedent for claiming half of savings she never contributed to. Another point for us. Brandon, still sitting there, acting like a king, waiting to collect his share of my money. And that's when something clicked. This wasn't just about Sophia getting paid. This was about them getting rich together. They thought they had played the system. They thought I was just another guy who would get screwed over in court. They underestimated me. The next session, Sophia turned up the dramatics. She cried. She played the devastated ex-wife. I have nowhere to go, she said, voice trembling, which was funny, considering she was literally living with Brandon. Jacob, calm as ever. Your Honor, we have evidence that the wife has been cohabiting with another man, which is relevant to the spousal support request. And then, we dropped the bomb. I handed Jacob screenshots of Brandon's texts to me. The one where he mocked me. The one where he bragged about taking my money. The mediator read them aloud. Sophia's lawyer? Looked like he wanted to disappear. The mediator looked at Sophia and Brandon for a long moment. Then she sighed. Given the circumstances, I strongly recommend that the wife reconsider her demands, as they are unlikely to succeed in court. Brandon's smirk? Gone. Sophia's face? Priceless. They thought they were entitled to my money. They thought the system would hand it to them. They thought wrong. Mediation failed. Sophia refused to settle, so the case moved to court. But by that point, we had already won. Jacob had every piece of evidence lined up. Proof that I bought the house before the marriage. Proof that she never contributed financially. Proof that she had another financial provider, Brandon. Proof that she and Brandon were counting on my money to fund their future. The judge? Not impressed with their act. Sophia? Starting to panic. Brandon? No longer smirking. And me? For the first time since this started, I felt calm, because I finally saw how this was going to end. Not with me losing everything. Not with them walking away with my money, but with justice. And when that final ruling came, oh, it was going to be beautiful. You ever meet someone so cocky, so convinced of their own victory, that they don't even consider the possibility of losing? That was Brandon. He strutted around like he had already won, like he was just waiting for the court to hand him my life on a silver platter. And the worst part? He wasn't even subtle about it. The first time he directly mocked me was right after the mediation failed. Sophia and her lawyer were scrambling to adjust their strategy, clearly realizing that things weren't going as planned. But Brandon? He was still laughing. Still acting like this was some game he was winning. That night, I got a message from him. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Why the hell would this guy be messaging me? But when I opened it, my hands clenched into fists. The text read, "Man, I almost feel bad for you. Almost. You really thought you were gonna walk away clean? LOL. Guess who's about to start house shopping? Thanks for funding our future." I stared at the message, heart pounding. Not from anger. Not from fear. From something colder. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. A deep, quiet resolve. I didn't respond. Because he wasn't worth it. But I did something better. I screenshot the text and sent it to my lawyer, Jacob. He called me back immediately. He sent you this? Directly? Yep, I said, voice flat. Jacob let out a low chuckle. Oh, he just made my job a whole lot easier. See, the thing about arrogance is that it makes you sloppy. Brandon thought he was untouchable. Thought the court was just going to blindly side with Sophia. He underestimated two things, the law, me. Because while he was texting me like an idiot, I was building my case. Over the next few weeks, Brandon kept running his mouth. He made comments during court proceedings. I can't wait to see the check clear. Hey, maybe we'll invite you to the housewarming party. He whispered to Sophia during breaks. Don't worry, babe. This loser can't stop us. He even made snide remarks to Jacob. Hope you're charging this guy extra, 'cause he's just wasting his money. And the worst part? He really believed it. He genuinely thought they were about to get half my house, half my savings, and endless support checks. It wasn't just about winning for him. It was about rubbing it in my face. Then came the final hearing. The one where the judge would decide everything. That morning, I barely slept. I kept replaying every court session, every argument, every time Brandon smirked at me like he had already won. But instead of fear, instead of anxiety, I felt ready. Because I knew what was coming. Walking into the courthouse, I saw them waiting by the entrance. Sophia in a sleek black dress, playing the grieving, wronged woman. Brandon standing beside her, smug as ever. He caught my eye, grinned. Hope you brought your checkbook, he said under his breath as I passed. I didn't respond, didn't even flinch, because soon, that smirk was going to disappear. Court was in session. The judge, stern, no nonsense, not in the mood for games. Jacob, calm, composed, ready. Sophia's lawyer, already sweating. And Brandon, still leaning back like he was watching a comedy show. Then the evidence was presented. First, the house. Mortgage documents proving I bought it before the marriage. Records showing that every payment came from my account, not joint funds. The judge nodded. Premarital asset, not subject to division. Sophia stiffened. Brandon's grin faltered. Next, the savings. Bank statements showing I funded the entire account. Withdrawal records proving Sophia took money, but never deposited any. The judge nodded again. No basis for equal division. The petitioner retains full rights to this account. Brandon's smirk was gone. Then came the bombshell. Jacob handed the judge a stack of papers. Screenshots of Brandon's text to me. Brandon, gloating about the money. Brandon, openly admitting they were planning to take everything. Brandon, mocking the entire legal process. The judge's eyes darkened. He looked up, straight at Sophia. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, voice sharp. Are you aware of these messages? Sophia's face turned pale. She didn't know. Your Honor, yes or no? Silence. Then, no, I didn't know. But it was too late. The damage was done. Brandon had ruined her case. The final ruling? Sophia got nothing from the house. Sophia got nothing from my savings. Sophia got a small settlement to transition into her new life, but far less than what she expected. Spousal support? Minimal. And only for a short period. And the best part? The judge cited Brandon's texts as evidence of financial manipulation. Meaning? Brandon's own arrogance had cost them everything. When the session ended, everyone stood up. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Sophia looked stunned. Brandon? Furious. As I walked past, he turned to me. This isn't over, he hissed. I smiled. No, Brandon, I said, voice calm. It's over for you. And then, I walked out, a free man. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not because I knew the outcome. No, that was still up in the air. But because this was the last step. After today, no more court dates. No more legal battles. No more Sophia and Brandon treating my life like a cash machine. Whatever happened, I'd walk out of that courtroom free. And that was enough. Walking into the courthouse, I saw them immediately. Sophia and Brandon. She looked tense, clutching a folder like it held all the power in the world. Brandon, still smirking. still convinced this was a done deal. As I passed, he leaned in. "Hope you're ready to pay up, champ," he whispered. I didn't stop walking, didn't even acknowledge him, because today, he wasn't my problem. Inside, the judge took his seat, straight-faced. No nonsense. This was it. My lawyer, Jacob, gave me a slight nod. He was ready. Sophia's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client has suffered significant financial hardship due to this divorce. She sacrificed her career to support the marriage, and she is entitled to a fair division of assets." I almost laughed. Sacrificed her career? She quit before we got married and never looked back. Jacob stood. "Your Honor, we have submitted evidence that the petitioner did not work before or during the marriage. Additionally, we have documented financial records proving that my client paid for the mortgage, utilities, and all living expenses alone. There was no joint contribution to these assets." The judge flipped through the documents. Sophia's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Sophia avoided eye contact. The judge finally looked up. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, voice measured, "can you provide any documentation proving that you contributed financially to these assets?" A pause. A long, awkward pause. Sophia's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Well, I supported him in other ways," she finally said. The judge didn't react. He simply turned to Jacob. "Counselor, let's proceed." Jacob moved to the next attack. "Your Honor, we also have documented evidence that the petitioner has been cohabiting with another man, Brandon Carter, since leaving the marital home. This is relevant to the request for spousal support." The judge turned to Sophia again. "Is this true?" Her lips parted slightly. For the first time, she looked nervous. I have a right to move on," she said finally. The judge nodded. "Of course, but it does impact the request for financial support. If you are living with another partner who provides financial assistance, it reduces the necessity of spousal maintenance." Translation? She had just shot herself in the foot. Then, Jacob pulled out the final dagger. The texts. Brandon's texts. The judge read them silently at first. Then, out loud. "I can't believe you're such a sucker, man. Thanks for setting us up. Hope you brought your checkbook." Sophia's face drained of color. "Brandon?" His smirk vanished. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Reynolds, were you aware that Mr. Carter was making these statements about your divorce proceedings?" Sophia shifted in her seat. "No, Your Honor," she mumbled. "Then let me ask you plainly. Was this divorce filed with the intention of securing financial benefits for both you and Mr. Carter?" She didn't answer. Which, really, was an answer. The ruling came fast. The house? Mine. The savings? Untouched. Spousal support? Minimal and temporary. The judge closed his folder. The court finds that the petitioner is not entitled to the requested asset division due to lack of financial contribution. Additionally, given the evidence provided, the court reduces the original spousal support request significantly. Then, the final blow. "Mr. Reynolds, you are free to go." I took a slow breath. It was over. Sophia? Looked shell-shocked. Brandon? Fuming. As I stood to leave, Sophia finally turned to me. "You're really just going to walk away?" she snapped, voice low. I met her gaze. Calm. Steady. "I already did," I said. Then, I turned my back for the last time. Outside the courtroom, my father was waiting. The moment he saw me, he broke into a grin. "That's my boy." Jacob shook my hand. That, he said, was one of the most satisfying wins I've had in a while. And me? I just stood there, taking it all in. I was free. No more games. No more manipulation. No more waking up every day wondering when the next betrayal would come. Sophia and Brandon thought they had beaten me, thought they could take what was mine. But in the end, they lost. And I walked away with everything I had earned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole again. I don't know what I expected to feel after walking out of that courtroom. Relief? Joy? Maybe some kind of cinematic moment where I'd stand in the sunlight, take a deep breath, and suddenly feel like a new man. Yeah, that didn't happen. The truth? I just felt tired. Tired from months of fighting. Tired of carrying the weight of a marriage that had been dead long before I ever admitted it to myself. tired of watching Sophia and Brandon act like they were entitled to everything I had built. But beneath all that exhaustion, buried deep under the bruises of a battle I never asked for, there was peace. I drove straight to my parents' house after court. I needed to see them. When I pulled into the driveway, my dad, Paul, was already standing on the porch, arms crossed, grinning. "You did it," he said as soon as I stepped out of the car. "Yeah," I exhaled. "It's over." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Knew you'd win. Never doubted you for a second." That made one of us. Inside, my mom, Linda, was waiting with coffee, like she already knew. And then there was my sister, Claire. She had been my biggest supporter through this whole thing, and judging by the way she was pacing the kitchen, she was more eager for details than anyone else. "Tell me everything," she demanded, eyes practically glowing. So I did. Told them about the ruling, about Brandon's texts backfiring spectacularly, about the moment Sophia realized she was walking away with nothing. When I finished, Claire let out a victorious yell. "Oh my God, I wish I was there to see her face." My mom sighed, shaking her head. "I still can't believe she thought she'd get away with this." My dad, laughing. "That idiot boyfriend of hers played himself," he said. "And she had the nerve to bring him to court? What a joke." I finally smiled. Because, yeah, it was a joke. And now, I was finally done playing. But Sophia? She wasn't done. Not even close. 3 days after the ruling, I started hearing rumors. Apparently, Sophia was telling everyone the judge was biased. He only sided with Nathan because he had a good lawyer. It wasn't fair. The system is broken. And the best one? He manipulated the evidence. Because, text messages from her boyfriend's own phone weren't real enough. But the kicker? Brandon was furious. He had counted on my money. He and Sophia had already started making plans with money they never actually had. Talking about investments. Looking at apartments. Brandon even quit his job, thinking they'd be set. And now? They were broke. One of my friends, Adam, who still ran in the same circles as Sophia, called me. "Man, you won't believe this," he said, barely holding back laughter. "Try me. Sophia's miserable. Brandon is freaking out. He really thought you were gonna hand them your house on a silver platter." I just chuckled. Because, honestly, they deserved it. They made their bed. They planned their little scheme. They walked into that courtroom thinking they had already won. And now, they were facing the consequences. The first time I ran into Sophia after the ruling, it wasn't planned. I was at a coffee shop, just grabbing my usual order, when I heard her voice behind me. "Nathan?" I turned, and there she was. Alone. No Brandon. No smug grin. No fake courtroom tears. Just Sophia. She looked different. Not in a sad way. Not even in a regretful way. Just defeated. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She hesitated for a second. Then, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Because, really, what was left to say? After everything? After the betrayal? The lies? The legal battle? After her standing next to another man, laughing at me in court, thinking she was about to walk away with half my life? What could she possibly have to say now? I didn't expect it to end like this," she finally said. I raised an eyebrow. "How exactly did you expect it to end?" She didn't have an answer. Because she had never considered losing. Sophia had always assumed she'd win. She had never imagined a version of this story where she walked away with nothing. But here we were. "Look," I said, sighing. "I don't hate you, Sophia. I really don't. But I'm done. You made your choices, and I made mine. And now we both live with them." Her lips pressed together. For a second, I almost thought she was going to apologize. Almost. But in the end, she just nodded. And then, she walked away. For the first time in a long time, it actually felt like closure. Not because she apologized. Not because she regretted it. But because I finally realized I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not answers. Not explanations. Not revenge. Nothing. I had already won. People assume divorce always ends with one side broken and bitter. And maybe, in some cases, that's true. But for me, it ended with freedom. Sure, I walked away with my house, my money, my dignity. But the real victory? Walking away with my peace. There's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from watching people get exactly what they deserve. Not in a petty way. Not in a revenge-driven kind of way. Just pure, unfiltered karma. And let me tell you, Sophia and Brandon, they got a full dose. After the final ruling, their reality hit them hard. No house, no savings, no long-term spousal support. Just whatever scraps Sophia had left, and a boyfriend who had been banking on my money to keep their lifestyle going. I didn't have to go looking for updates. They found their way to me. A week after the ruling, I got a text from Claire. Claire, check out what just popped up in my feed. Attached was a screenshot from a mutual acquaintance's post. It was Sophia, at a diner, waiting tables. I stared at the picture for a long moment, letting it sink in. This was the same woman who had once laughed in my face when I suggested she get a job. The same woman who swore she'd never do anything beneath her. And now? She was working double shifts just to get by. But it got better. The next text from Claire? Even better. Claire, Brandon's back at his old job. The one he quit because he thought he'd be rich off your divorce. LMAO. I actually laughed out loud. Because of course he was. Of course Brandon had to crawl back to whatever dead-end job he thought he was too good for. This was a guy who had quit his job before the court ruling. Why? Because he was so sure I was going to be paying for his life. And now? He was back at square one. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The best part? People started turning on them. Because here's the thing. When people think you're about to get rich, they stay close. But when you lose everything, they scatter. Sophia's friends? Gone. Brandon's buddies? Nowhere to be found. People who once cheered them on, mocked me behind my back, and acted like I was some sucker who was about to lose it all? Silent. It was like watching a kingdom collapse overnight. They had built their future on a fantasy. And now? They were drowning in reality. A few weeks later, I ran into an old coworker, Adam, who used to be friends with Brandon. Dude, he said, shaking his head. You wouldn't believe the meltdown that guy had. Oh. I leaned in, amused. Man, after the court ruling, he went off on Sophia, screaming about how she ruined everything, how this wasn't what he signed up for. I raised an eyebrow. So, what? He thought she was just gonna hand him my money? Adam shrugged. Pretty much. He legit told people he was set for life. Now, he's stuck in a tiny apartment, broke as hell, and pissed that Sophia can't support him. I shook my head, smirking. Brandon thought he was playing the game. Instead, he got played. Then came the final twist. Sophia. Calling me. I was sitting at home, finally enjoying my peace, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Her name flashed across the screen. I just stared at it. Because why? Why would she be calling me? I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then, finally, I picked up. Silence. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a quiet voice, Nathan? I exhaled slowly. What do you want, Sophia? She hesitated. I don't know. I wanted to talk. I leaned back, rubbing my temple. About what? Everything, I guess. I didn't think things would turn out like this. I closed my eyes. Because that's what it always was with her. Never an apology. Never ownership of her mistakes. Just regret that she lost. Sophia, I said finally, what exactly do you want me to say? She was quiet for a second. Then, I thought maybe we could be friends. I let out a slow, dry chuckle. Friends? She swallowed. I don't know. Sophia. I cut her off. The last time we were in the same room, you were trying to take half of everything I owned. Your boyfriend was laughing about how they were going to spend my money. And now, because it didn't work out, you want to talk? She exhaled sharply. It's not like that, she said. Then what's it like? Another pause. Then, finally, I don't know. And that was the most honest thing she had ever said. Because Sophia never knew what she wanted. She wanted comfort, but without effort. She wanted money, but without work. She wanted security, but only if someone else provided it. And now that her plan had crashed and burned, she had no idea what to do next. Not my problem. Look, I said finally, I don't hate you, Sophia, but we're not friends. We were never friends. And honestly, I'm good. I don't need this conversation." She sighed. "Yeah," she murmured. "I figured you'd say that." Then she hung up, and I smiled, because, for the first time, I realized something. I had won long before the court ruling, not because I kept my house, not because I kept my money, not because I avoided paying for their fantasy life, but because I moved on. And Sophia? She never would. People like Sophia and Brandon never change. They never take responsibility. They just blame everyone else for their downfall. But the truth? They did this to themselves. They played dirty. They thought they had it all figured out. They laughed in my face. And now? They were struggling to survive while I thrived. Justice? It doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes, it comes in watching people self-destruct under the weight of their own choices. And that was the real victory. There's something strange about rebuilding your life after a storm. For so long, I had been in survival mode, waiting for the next betrayal, the next legal battle, the next smug grin from Brandon as he planned his future with my money. But now, the storm had passed, and all that was left was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that makes you uneasy. The kind of quiet that tells you, you're finally free. It took time for that feeling to settle in. At first, I still woke up expecting to fight, to check emails from my lawyer, to prepare for another court date, to brace myself for some last-minute trick from Sophia. But none of it came. Instead, I woke up, I made coffee, and for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's mess. It was just me. And that was enough. I started making changes. Not big, dramatic ones. Just small things that reminded me this was my life again. First, I redecorated. That house, the one Sophia once tried to take, it no longer had any trace of her. The old furniture? Gone. The framed wedding photos? Trashed. The cheap decorations she had insisted on? Burned in the fire pit out back. I replaced everything with things that felt like me. New couch. New art on the walls. A home that no longer whispered her presence every time I walked through the door. It was mine again. Completely. Then, I started living again. Not just existing. Actually living. I reconnected with old friends. People I had lost touch with because Sophia had pulled me away from them. The first time I went out for drinks with them, I realized something. I had spent so much time walking on eggshells, trying to keep Sophia happy, trying to be the perfect husband for someone who never really cared. Now, I could just be me. And for the first time in years, I remembered what that felt like. Then, I picked up my guitar again. Music had always been a passion of mine, but somewhere along the way, I had let it slip away. Sophia had never outright told me to stop playing, but she had always made it clear she didn't see the point. It's just a hobby, Nathan. Why waste your time? So I had let it go. Now, I picked it up again. And damn, it felt good. I started playing at a local bar on open mic nights. Not for money. Not for attention. Just because it made me happy. And after everything, I deserve to be happy. I also started working out again. Not out of anger. Not because I needed some revenge glow up. Just because it felt good to take care of myself. To focus on my own body, my own health, my own confidence. There was something satisfying about looking in the mirror and seeing a man who had rebuilt himself. A man who had been burned down to the foundation and came back stronger. The real test came 2 months after the final ruling. I was at the grocery store, grabbing a few things when I turned down an aisle and there she was. Sophia. She was standing in front of the dairy section, staring blankly at a carton of eggs. For a second, she didn't notice me. Then, our eyes met. And just like that, time froze. I could see the moment it hit her. The realization of where she was, who she was looking at. For a second, she hesitated. Then, she took a slow step toward me. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I gave her a polite nod. Nothing more. She studied me, and I could see it in her eyes. She was expecting something. Anger. Bitterness. Some last, heated conversation where we rehashed everything that had happened. Instead, I just stood there, unbothered, free. "You look good," she said after a moment. Thanks, I replied, reaching for a loaf of bread and tossing it into my cart. More silence. How have you been? She asked. I shrugged. Good. Really good. And I meant it. Every single word. Sophia, on the other hand, she didn't look so good. She looked drained, like life had knocked her around in ways she hadn't expected. Brandon and I broke up, she blurted suddenly, watching my reaction. I didn't give her one. I figured, I said simply. She shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't who I thought he was. I gave her the smallest smirk. Yeah, I could have told you that. Another pause. She exhaled, crossing her arms. I miss you sometimes, you know? And there it was. The confession I knew was coming. I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. Then, I smiled. Not because I missed her, not because I wanted her back, but because, for the first time, I realized I felt nothing for her. No hate, no longing, no regrets, just nothing. Take care of yourself, Sophia, I said finally. Then, I grabbed my cart and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her. No dramatic moment, no lingering emotions, no second thoughts. Just a man walking forward, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. And that was the real fresh start. When you lose yourself in a toxic relationship, it takes time to come back. It takes time to rediscover the things that make you happy. It takes time to remember who you were before they tried to break you. But when you do, when you finally step into that new life, one that's completely your own, there's no better feeling in the world. I don't think about Sophia anymore. I don't think about Brandon. I don't think about the battle I had to fight. Because it's over. And me? I'm standing on solid ground, moving forward, and never looking back.